Welcome back to another episode of the Backlog Breakdown, a video game podcast where we seek to encourage and equip the church to engage the medium of video games wisely and responsibly. I'm one of your hosts, Nate, and with me tonight, as always, is my co-host, friend, and brother in Christ, Joshua. How you doing, big guy?
Hey, doing well. It's a good day. It's a good day.
It's a good day. No, it's not. There's snow on the ground, and I hate it.
It is also the Lord's Day. I'll just say that.
Yeah,
so.
we are recording on a Sunday evening, which is not the norm for us.
It's not.
But
Yeah.
you know what? Like, I figured this would, we were talking about it and we kind of wanted to get ahead on some scheduling. I was like, this is a good way to kind of close that out.
I agree. I agree. My wife disagreed, but I agree.
Well, she did not like that. Like,
it's also because I have a Bible study with a bunch of dudes on Monday mornings at 5:30.
No.
And so, yeah. So I had a conversation with her because I was like, do you even want me to come to bed last night? Because I will go to sleep tonight, because I will go to sleep on the couch because I don't want to wake you up like when I go to sleep and then also when I wake up. And she's like, no, it's okay. You should still. And I was like, okay. But then she was like, why are you doing this now anyway? Why didn't you do it yesterday? All this stuff. And I'm like, no. I've made it a rule. Like Saturday nights is not good because I don't want to steal away from Sunday morning. I don't want to run that risk of, sleeping past my alarm. And
what time?
All that
what
stuff.
time do you start on Sunday morning?
Our service is at 9:30, and so we have a run through with the band at 8:30. So I probably wasn't there till like 8:10, 8:15 this morning because
what time do you get up?
But I slept through. My watch alarm was being funky and didn't go off, and so I woke up just naturally, and it was like 7:20 ish. And so I'm like,
no,
my goodness, yeah. My alarm was set for 6. This is almost an hour and a half afterwards. But I like to get there. Like 7 between 7 and 7:30, just because it gives me time to just kind of think through things again, warm up my voice, warm up my fingers, stuff like that. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It's okay. I still prepare,
the end of the world,
obviously, but yeah. Anyways, yeah. But I just don't. Yeah, I don't want to run the risk of that. But anyways. That's neither here nor there. I'm happy to be here, and I'm stoked. I even told my wife this too. Is like, hey, I get to hang out with my friend tonight, and then take a quick nap, and then hang out with my other friends and read Romans together. So like, it's good. Yeah, I'm gonna be tired tomorrow. Worth it. #worth it.
#worth it.
Throw that up on TikTok.
Well, and now you get to like sort of experience some of those nights where like we stay up and I'm like, yeah, I got to be up in 4 hours.
Right. Yeah. Literally told her that. I was like, it's either him or me, and I'm taking it this time because usually you have to. So
usually that's me. And I don't mind. It's something I'm glad to do. It's like I have, as a general, I try not to, but I can operate on 4 hours of sleep. Okay. As long as it's like as long as I'm getting like good sleep around the rest of the week. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. If I have some time to recover, it's okay. But yeah.
I feel you. Yeah. I feel you, man. So yeah, well, we will endeavor. I mean, I have a feeling that we will fail because we always fail at this, but we will endeavor to be good at brevity, or to not be bad at brevity tonight. But
that's true, because we're not really talking about the best games. The games that we're talking about tonight are kind of vanilla.
Yeah. That was terrible, and I hate it.
It had,
but
to
I
come
expect
out sometime,
nothing
right?
less. I expect nothing less from you. Nothing. But and we'll get there. We're gonna be talking. We're gonna do a developer deep dive. We haven't done one of these. I don't know. Have we? Maybe we've done like 1 or 2 of these ever, but this is kind of one of those studios that we wanted to just take some time to sort of sing praises of, because we think they're a really great studio with a really great style and they make some really cool games. There's also some caveats and some warnings, and but we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there, which hopefully won't be too long. But Josh, it has been, or rather it's been Yes, a minute since we last spoke. So,
Mm-hmm.
how are you doing, guy? Like, how are the broccolos these days?
We're good. We're good. We've got off the sickness train, which is great. Penny did have some issues with her tummy this morning, but they have
Mm-mm.
since subsided. We're golden, no problem at all. So she just sat with us in service this morning, just because she was feeling a little funky earlier, but nothing happened. Nothing came of that. But Penny is our most wild one, I will say, out of our children, and so to see her like low on energy, it's like, uh-oh, something's wrong. But no, she was fine. She was fine after that. So we are doing good. We talked a little bit before we hit record. It's chilly here.
Mhm.
Isn't that funny? We go to like sickness and then the weather. That seems to always be what it is. But no,
Well,
I'll share.
those
What's
are
that?
those are like the common threads. It's like it
It's
is
like
weird.
life, man.
It's just like that's really what life distills down to. It's like, are you healthy? And what's it like outside?
Right, exactly. There's just common denominators among anyone. Um, I will share one story, and it's from this morning, because in all my years of growing up in the church and as many services I've been to, I think this morning was the first time that something had ever happened to me. And that something was that while we were taking communion, I spilled the juice all over myself.
Oh
And I
no.
felt so stupid. Luckily, the response song after we took communion, I had my guitar in front of me, so you couldn't see like the huge splotch that was
The huge juice
on my
stain.
yeah, exactly. But oh my goodness, the ushers that were in front of me were kind of like, holding back, but then also like pulled out some Kleenex, some tissue, and then helped me. But I was just like, and I can't blame it on anything. It was no one else's fault. It was I just totally missed my mouth and just got it
Wow.
all over my shirt. Yeah, I don't know what was going on in my head, but I felt very, very stupid. But
I bet
you
you
roll with
felt
the punches.
SMRT is what you
Yeah,
felt. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. There was a tiny little bit at the bottom of the little cup, so I still did. I was able to
So
finish
you didn't have
communion,
to go
but
up and say like, I need more.
I'm so sorry. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so
right,
sorry.
exactly. Yeah,
Oh man.
and right, I mean, I guess the transubstantiation guys would really, like
Freak
then I
out
would have
about
really
that.
screwed up,
I
but
think
thankfully, that's not the case.
I think in some ways it's like it doesn't like matter until you put it in your body or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's the point.
I
Okay.
don't understand that argument. I think
I
it's
don't know either.
weird and silly. And
I
it's
don't know
like,
either.
is it more, is communion more than mere remembrance?
Mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Like, the perspective that I hold to, we call it real presence.
Yeah.
Like through the power of the Holy Spirit, you are in the presence of God. Like you are in communion with God.
Mhm,
Like, and I think that's pretty typically like a reformed
mhm,
position.
mhm.
um so like but yeah, the consubstantiation, the transubstantiation, I'm just like,
Right.
that's that's weird. I
Mhm.
don't know, but I'm
Yeah.
also not a Catholic or a Lutheran, so I'm
Right.
a Presbyterian. Get used to it, deal
Yeah.
with it.
I'm a non-denom. Yeah,
uh
like oh, great. Yeah.
like
I'm
that's
the
like that's like listen, like it's a Scooby-Doo meme. It's like you pull off the mask and like, okay, non-denominational, let's see what you really are, and it's like you're a Baptist.
Yes, that's fair. Th I'm much happier with that meme than, the other meme that you could go with, I feel like, with non-denoms is like, why are you even showing that to them? Those kids can't even read." The Simpsons meme where you have the sign that they show outside, and they're like, "Joke's on you, because those kids can't even read that sign."
I don't remember that joke. I
I'll
don't know that
okay.
meme.
I'll have to share it with you.
You'll have to
I'm
share
sure
that
you
one with
would
me.
if you see it, but anyways, that's the only thing that I had
Yeah.
to share is that I was a complete dunce this morning in
Yeah.
church and spilled juice all over
Yeah.
myself. It's great.
I think I
It's
did that.
wonderful.
Like I'm pretty sure that I had that happen. Like I did that when I was a teenager and
Okay.
like ruined like a pair of pants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Luckily,
it's
it
grape
didn't even
juice.
make it. Yeah, it didn't even make it to my. It is. It is. It was just straight all over my shirt and my arm. But
No, if you're
anyways,
really cool, you guys would use wine, but that also stains.
Right. Yes. And actually funny enough, the Presbyterian church we visited while we were in Texas, they did use wine. I was like, that's cool. It was wine on the outside and then juice on the inside of the
That's what we do.
Yeah.
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 Nice. There you go.
We
Um,
also just I know we're kind of like the little bit of a rabbit hole. We've started so the entire congregation, instead of um passing the plates or the communion plates,
mhm.
um everybody rises and we go to the front, but we're all singing. Like there's like we have our
Okay.
little PowerPoint thing and the words, and we sing hymns as we take the get the elements, and then we go back to our seats and then we sing. And it's a really cool it has precedent in some, like it's not unique to us. There are other
Mhm.
churches that have done this historically, and I imagine there are some churches that still do it. Um, but we really like it, and
Yeah.
it's really pretty cool. So
Nice.
I
Nice.
would recommend it to anybody. It's like, hey, you know, try it out because it rocks.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
pretty cool. But anyways, yeah.
Sweet. Well,
So
that sounds
yeah,
yeah.
well, so
Hap-
everybody's pretty happy, healthy. I mean, you're a klutz, but
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I, I'm a buffoon. So yeah, I mean,
Y- yeah. Yeah. You have to laugh about it, you know.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, we're doing good. How about you? How have you guys been?
We have not, like, we
Uh,
this is like round, feels like 10,000 with some sort of like disease just like rolling through
uh,
the house.
yeah.
I've got like a little bit of a sinus thing. Byron is just like this snotty, gross mess that like we're constantly wiping his nose. And
Mhm.
he does know how to, like, when you're like blow your nose. And so sometimes we don't have to do the thing where we hold him down and then suck it out anymore.
Right.
He can
Oh, it's
blow some
super
of it out.
fun.
Oh, he loved that.
Uh-huh. Oh, though every kid does. Yeah, it's their
Yeah,
favorite.
he would scream, um, like we were torturing him.
Mhm.
Which in a way, that's probably what it felt like. It's probably not super pleasant.
Mhm.
It's, I haven't jammed one of
Sure.
those things up and sucked my own nose out. But
Yeah.
but I also, like, here's the thing. Have you ever used a neti pot before?
I have not used one. We owned one when we might still own one. But my wife had used it. I think I tried at one point. That's just the weirdest thing. No, I haven't.
It's a weird sensation. I actually don't
Yeah.
like neti pots, but I do have like the neti squeeze bottle thing where you make the saline solution, and then
Okay.
there's a, like, and they're like semi disposable, like they're good for like 2 or 3 months, and then they're like, yeah, you should just throw this out because it's like kind of gross now. um but yeah, sometimes I use that to like clean out my schnoz
Mhm.
when I'm really gross and blocked up. But anyways, yeah, neti pots, they're super fun. I
Mhm.
but I do that on purpose because, like, I don't mind the feeling, and it's actually, when you can like really clean out your sinuses, it's awesome. Anyways, uh, but yeah,
Nice.
so we're just like wrestling with sickness again. Things at work have been kind of like, it's just garbage weather. Like, dude, it's like it hasn't really stopped snowing, and like it's not snowing hard, but it's like it
Okay.
just won't let up. And it's like as soon as the roads get kind of clean, it's like, oh hey, here's a few more inches for you. And it's like,
Yeah.
awesome. This sucks. Like,
Not a
uh,
fan.
not a fan. So I mean, that's just kind of like whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I mean, things are like, they're not bad, but they're not
Okay.
awesome either. It's just like, this is kind of like the season where it's just like, hey, we're like sick all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. I mean, it's just that season of life where it's not
Sure.
bad. It's just like it's not awesome either. Like, for the most part, like, yeah, we've got like the sniffles or some junk, but like for the most part, everybody's like happy and healthy. Byron is eating though. Like, here's the thing. Like,
Okay. Okay.
he's
Yeah.
like, we were going for a couple weeks where it was just like he was like kind of being really fussy
Mhm.
and just like, I'm not eating this. I'm not eating this. Like, and it's like, come
Yeah.
on, buddy. It's like, you would give it to him like the day or two before, and he'd like be like all about it. And then the
Okay.
next day you're like, hey, you like this thing? And he's like, no, I don't. Um,
Not anymore.
he's like, not anymore. I changed my
Uh,
mind. It was like,
yeah.
um, but he has, we think he might be like going through a growth spurt or whatever. So it's like,
Okay.
it's that kind of thing where it's like, as a parent, like when your child's not eating the way that you think they should, you kind of like, it's like low key freak out. You're like, dude, you need to eat, guy. And it's
Mhm.
like, I don't even care if it's like good for you at this point in time. I just need you to put food in you.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like it's like, oh, you would just want to eat like handfuls of goldfish crackers, awesome. But he's kind of at a point where it's like he's actually like eating and not
Sweet.
just like, oh, like it's noodles, it's mashed potatoes, it's mac and cheese, like because that's like easy
Mhm.
stuff. And like but yeah, now he's eating like chicken and beef.
Okay.
And it's really funny. He does this thing like you'll prepare a plate of the exact same thing you're eating for him, and he'll like be content. But as soon as you sit down beside him with your plate, he looks at
Mhm.
you and goes, bite, bite. Like, and then
It's
he
like,
he
"Oh, yeah."
expects you to give him a bite of your food. And I was like, dude, you've got your own right here, man. And he's like, bite.
Mhm.
Um, no, but that part is super cute. But yeah, so it's like, but yeah, that's just kind of like, yeah, that's just the season we're in. So
Yep. Yeah.
it's
Totally.
it's not good, not bad. Like for the most part, we're not healthy, but we're not at death's door either.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Not in the middle of it. Yeah,
it's
man.
the middle. So, but yeah, but Josh, I'm just wondering, besides like how you guys have been, what have you
Mhm.
been into lately?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got some media to report on.
Is that necessary?
It is absolutely necessary because I love it so much. Anyways, no, some of the stuff that I have been
You
into
heart it.
actually, yeah. The so the first thing is a YouTube channel. It's a podcast as well, but I've just been watching the YouTube videos that the guy has
Mm-hmm.
been producing. His name is Reagan Rose. I believe I had first heard of him through the Jono in the Discord.
Mm.
But his podcast, his stuff that he does is called Redeeming Productivity. And I had kind of I had enjoyed some of the stuff that he's done here and there, but I kind of at the turn of the new year dug into his stuff quite a bit more, and I really appreciate just his take on productivity and what it means. Not being productive for the sake of being productive, or being a millionaire or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of glorifying God. And so asking yourself, are you actually fulfilling the roles that God has called you to, and how can you get better in those things, primarily for God's
He
glory.
he actually did an episode with a friend of the show, Patrick Miller from Truth Over Tribe.
Nice.
And
Okay.
Reagan is pretty notoriously anti-video game, so he
hmm
would not like us so much. Well,
Well,
I shouldn't say that, but I think like we do sort of. I think like what I've listened to, because I've listened to some of his stuff before, and
mhm.
I think for the most part I would agree with him. I just also think that his perspective on video games, it sounds like it's like the way I would say is like that sounds like it's more of a you problem, friend,
Right. Right.
than
Yes. Yeah, and that's the only thing that I've heard him address is like, I used to be addicted to online video games, and
yeah.
so I don't play anymore. So I'm like, okay, that's totally cool. That's like almost a different category in my mind. You know what I mean? Um,
It's like it's like somebody to me that response is the same as like, oh, I used to be an alcoholic and now I
mhm,
can't touch alcohol. Oh, alcohol is bad. The response is almost like alcohol is bad. Like, no,
mhm.
your relationship with it is bad.
Yeah.
This is a thing that can be used and leveraged to great good
Yeah.
when wielded properly.
Mhm.
And I'm a slight exaggeration on great good with video games, but yeah,
Sure.
it's like that's the one. like, but yeah, I've listened to some of his stuff, and I really do. One, the episode with Patrick, because Patrick was basically coming on and making like mounting a defense for video games and just being like, well, he
Oh,
kind of, I
okay.
think, says like, without saying it, but I think he kind of says like, dude, yeah, because it's Patrick, and he's like very
Yeah,
tactful, and
right.
but he was just like the way I would have said it is like, my guy, that's a you problem. Whereas Patrick
Yeah.
says it in a much more, I think, gentle way. So I did enjoy that episode. I think just
Okay.
his general, yeah, the general bend towards productivity, not as like just a means to be like a millionaire or to just pursue sort of like the consumerist kind of materialist perspective, but as
Mhm.
like a means of giving glory to God and having like a well organized life. I think that's actually I think he does a fantastic job on that end of the
Yeah.
spectrum. So yeah.
Yep. Yep, and yeah, I'll need to check that one out then in particular because the stuff that I've watched, listened to on redeeming productivity he's only kind of tangentially talked about video games, but in
Hmm.
his own story, like he hasn't specifically addressed them. So I'll need to watch that one. But thank you for that as well because that's a good word, especially to everyone listening to this. If I recommend something and then they're bashing video games, like thank you for catching that. I didn't realize that that was a part of it, but I do appreciate, especially turn of the year, looking towards new goals and stuff like that. It was a very helpful kind of framework that he uses.
Hmm.
Um, so that's one of the things that I've been into. The next thing that I'm into, actually, for all of y'all watching this on YouTube, it's here in the background, is this guy right here, Haunted Cosmos, doing your duty in a
Oh, you got
world
the
that's not just stuff.
book.
So it's not mine. It's a friend of mine at church. He got it from his wife for Christmas. I think it was from his wife. And so he just had twins right after, actually at the turn of the new year, and so he's like, yeah, I'm sitting at home. I don't have much to do, and so he blazed through the book in just like a few days. He was like,
Mm,
do you want to borrow it, do you want to read it? He said it was really good. So I've been reading it,
I
and
really
I'm
want that book.
it okay. So it's not what I expected. It's not just like more stories of haunted
No,
cosmos, at
no.
least it's not so far. I'm maybe a third of the way into it. Okay, so two thoughts. One is that I think these guys read a lot of Doug Wilson because of the way that they write is very it's flowery in the same way that Doug Wilson writes. And the way that is written, it sounds like the way that they talk, if that makes sense. You know how Blog and Mablog has like a very specific like, not that it goes off in tangents, but it uses like tons of metaphors and does kind of like go off in different areas, it has like
Hmm.
side notes and things like that just in the middle of it. And that's the way that this is written, which honestly at first kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I'm kind of like, okay, get to the point. Like I see that you're clever, but just kind of get to the point. At first, that was my initial reaction. Okay. But the first section of this book is talking about the wonder of creation, basically, of the way that God has created the world, and the fact that there are mysteries at our fingertips every moment of our life that we take for granted, and it is like it was just so cool. Like I after I kind of got all over the initial hump of like, oh, like you're kind of coming off more, yeah, I guess flowery, whatever, however
It's
you want to say it.
they mount I and I haven't, this is me not having read the book, but from
Hmm.
what I understand, they're mounting a defense for the enchanted worldview.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that is like, and they do that sort of in a long form way
Hmm.
with the podcast,
Right.
right, by sharing stories and kind of like teasing that out. But
Hmm.
I think this is probably a lot more direct.
Hmm.
um yeah, and I would say that they're in some ways probably informed by Doug Wilson a good bit. uh so yeah, like, I don't, well, and Brian is a songwriter.
Hmm.
um and I think
Right. Right.
Ben
I'm
does
sure that.
like to write fiction. I don't know that
Okay.
he's published
Okay.
anything. So I think that that's probably just their authorial voice.
Right.
Is that they tend to be maybe a little. I think you would be fair in sort of like maybe accusing them of being a little bit purple with their prose.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
so,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, I don't think they're a little wordy, but not
Mhm.
obnoxiously so.
Right. It took me some getting used to, is what I'm trying to
Hmm.
say, because
Yeah.
what kind of annoyed me a little bit at first, I grew to like, and especially when they really dig into, like when I finally see where they're going with it, like their main point, then they go off and talk about all the different ways in which you're talking about the world being enchanted, just like the simple things that we ought to be in awe of, the way that God has made the world, the way that, God made cows taste good. How cool is that?
Hmm.
That's something really simple. But as soon as you step outside, there are creatures underneath your feet, and in your yard, just all these things that play together in order to have, I can make a cup of coffee in the morning, which is, beans that come from a cherry that were harvested, across the world, and you roast them, and then you grind them, and then you pour water over them, and it makes this delicious drink. Like, what? Like, that's insane, but it's something that we take for granted every day. It's insane that it can give us, this vitality and enjoyment, and God's created it to do that. So anyways, those are just very mundane kinds of things, but they
No,
talk
yeah,
about that, and anyways, so I really like it. That's the foundation that they're laying. I'm sure from
yeah.
there they kind of springboard into other things, but
Well, and I
enjoying it.
think that's in some ways, and not to get too far afield again, that's like the heart of the Enchanted worldview. Like, yes, is it like
Hmm.
fun to talk about like Nephilim and the Fae and sort of like, yeah, like, the fact that humanity sort of lives as these bridge creatures. Like we
Hmm.
exist not just in the physical realm, but in the spiritual realm. And
Yep.
great, and we participate in both, right? That we are
Right.
physical and spiritual creatures. Um, so that's like the really weird, funky, out there stuff. But a lot of it is also just about remembering how like glorious and
Hmm.
wild this life really is. And I think like
Yep. Yep.
even as like a counterpoint to like strict materialism is like just like sucks the life out of everything.
Right.
It
Yeah.
really does. Because
Hmm.
it's just like it's just stuff. Functionally, it's just stuff. And
Yeah.
it's
You
like,
say it sucks the life out of it, but it literally has no explanation of life itself.
well, and it's like for like it's soulless,
Yeah.
literally.
Right. Right.
And that like it's just zeros. It's just chemical zeros and ones. It's just
Hmm.
entropy, baby. And it's like even as Christians, it just when we sort of like retreat in that, like we are sort of losing. I mean, and this is like what I said the other week when we were talking about this. It's like
Hmm.
I hold to this worldview, not just because I think the arguments are better.
Hmm.
Like I think they're stronger. I think that's like when you do your homework, I think this is what like our Bibles are really telling us about the world, about life, about the human experience.
Hmm.
But also it's way cooler. Like
Yeah.
it's
Right.
just so much cooler.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So far, it's reminded me of the way that I feel when I read C.S. Lewis's stuff,
yeah.
of just that sense of awe and wonder. Like I think Lewis just has such an imagination, and he's able to
Well,
capture so many things like that. Whereas this one is straight, like explaining, but it's like, oh yeah, man, just things that I had never thought, that I take for granted day in
Lewis
and day
was
out.
rooted in the medieval traditions,
Right?
like,
Yeah.
and the Enchanted worldview is rooted in medieval traditions.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I think we were talking with Paul about this, and he's like, listen, it's not like the ancients actually. He's like, it's not like every ancient actually thought that the Earth was the center of creation,
Hmm.
like the physical center of the universe. He's like, and of
Hmm.
course, it theoretically could be. I don't think it is, but it's like it was like they were talking about metaphysical realities,
Hmm.
and that's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the enchanted worldview stuff is cool.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you want to be
And
cool, people, go go read up on it.
Yeah, check it out. But yeah,
'Cause it's
I'm enjoying the
sick.
book so far. Still, like I said, I don't think I'm even halfway into it, so I can give an update
Mhm.
as you know I finish it out. Because I do want it. Like I've intentionally tried to read it fairly quickly. Like it's on the front burner for me because it's my friend's copy that he lent me.
And
So
while we were recording this, I just went and ordered a
you
copy.
just bought it. You just
I
got
just
it.
bought it. Like,
Nice.
Megan's probably gonna yell at me, like, "Why are you spending money?" Well,
Another book, yeah. Well, now that I've talked about two things that I think are edifying and helpful, the other one is just something fun. My wife and I sat down and watched an anime, a movie called Your Name. Apparently, it's one of the classic. You know, like you hear about this all the time, and I had known about it for quite a while. I had actually picked it up on a sale a
is
while
that like
ago.
the weird time travel-y one?
Spoilers, yes.
Sorry,
Um,
sorry.
that's okay.
Okay,
It
okay.
is, yeah, it's like I was
I
gonna say
need to finish that
rom-com. It's
one.
not really comedy. Okay, you didn't finish it. Okay.
It's like
Um,
it's kind of a romance.
right.
It's like a
Yeah.
romantic slice of life. Well, slice of life tends
Yep.
to be fairly like romantically inclined, but yeah, it's slice of lifey. Yeah.
Yeah. Cute little slice of life movie. I had heard, you know, you someone usually chops onions by the end of the movie. It didn't hit me that hard, but I did enjoy it. Like I thought it
Yeah.
was cute. My wife enjoyed it as well. And yeah, kind of just the slice of life things. You know, we laughed a number of times just because, you know, it's teenage boy, teenage girl,
There's
like it's just cute.
there's
So,
some really like great ones on Netflix.
okay.
But there's a series. There's a series. Have you ever watched Your Lie in April? Like talking about like
No,
one.
I know of it, but I have not
Oh,
seen it.
dude, like I can't even say there were ninjas chopping onions. Like at the end, I was like practically like bawling.
Okay.
Um,
Oh wow.
like listen, I do have a heart, you know. And
Mhm.
it's just like it's such like a bittersweet story, and I was just
Okay.
like ugly crying and everything practically. So
Mm,
if you want to feel bad but also really good, um, Your Lie in April is really good.
gotcha. Is it a show, or is it a
Yeah, but
movie?
it's like
Okay.
one season, and it's pretty.
Okay.
It's not like super crazy or anything, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's pretty
Nice.
tame. Like,
Okay.
because you know how like sometimes like they get a little fan servicey. I think that one's pretty tame.
Right. Yeah. No, and that was something that I noticed with Your Name. Okay. So it's not. This happens early in the movie, so it's. I don't think it's too spoilery. But the main girl and the main guy, they're teenagers. They switch bodies. So one of the first things that the boy does when he gets the girl's body is he starts feeling his chest. And my wife just started laughing because she's like, "Yeah, he's a teenage boy. Of course, that's what he's gonna do."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a little awkward." And then later on in the movie, when you see the girl uh, is in the boy's body, she like puts her hand in her pants because she's like, "Something's there."
This
And again, my wife just laughed because she's like, yeah, of course they're teenagers. Like it's just, so it's not like, yes, there's a way to do that that's way more fan servicey, you
yeah.
know, like weird camera angles and all that stuff, which is not a part of the movie, which I very much appreciated.
Hmm.
It was just like, yeah, okay, they're teenagers. Like, yeah, that's probably what they do. So, anyways, yeah, Your
It's a
Name is cute,
realistic with it.
is good,
It's a realistic sort of thing without being like too pervy.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's
so
cool. Yeah,
we
that's
enjoyed it. We enjoyed
yeah.
it. It's
I
good.
need to finish. I started that one a while ago, and I need to because I do like a good slice of life. That probably is like low
Yeah.
key, like actually like my favorite style. Um,
Okay.
just because like they tend to be like a little sweet, a little melancholy, like that.
Mhm.
Like you know how you're like you're sad boy emo.
Right.
Like
Yep.
for me, it's like
Totally.
I I I tap into my sad feels and I watch slice of life sad anime
Mm,
um
there
occasionally.
you
So
go. Nice. Well, that is the media that I have to report on. What do you have
okay.
to report on?
Couple well, I gotta pull up my show notes here. Oh, come
Uh-oh.
on. Oh, such good radio. Wow.
Notes.
Wow. I'm still working through The Unseen Realm by Heiser.
Yeah. I mean, a decent
Well,
sized book. So yeah,
and
it
it's
takes a
like
while.
I would call it like again, I would like academic light. It's not really like
Right.
heavy. It's like a little scholastic, but it's also not meant like I don't think it's meant to be like a textbook curriculum kind of thing. But
Right.
it's a little weightier, a little heavier.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I also am recommending Haunted Cosmos, but not the book, just the podcast. Because
Nice.
I'm a like full disclosure, I'm a patron. I
Okay.
really like the Dusty Tome. I just love their
Okay.
content, and they did some wild stuff on like there's and this is like I've already listened to I think almost all of this season. I think they've got a couple more episodes. But they have you ever heard of Coral Castle? Apparently, I think it's in Florida.
Coral Castle. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I started
Th-
the episode, but I haven't gotten
Yeah,
very
so
far into it.
that
Yeah.
series is pretty cool. I liked both of those. Uh and just like the Dusty Tome rules because like the Dusty Tome is more of like they just like talk about like it's just scary stories now, which
Uh-huh.
I'm like yes. Like give me the spookums. Um like make it hard for me to sleep at night. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh
There you go.
um but I really do like that podcast. It is not like listen, if you what I would say is just like the book and like again the book seems like more of just sort of a bit of a defense and a sort of an exploration of the enchanted worldview stuff, whereas with the podcast they do sort of get into like spooky vibes territory. So
Right.
if you have an imagination or just a personality that reacts pretty poorly to that stuff,
Hmm.
don't. um or like just because like I can get that way. Like I
Okay.
like full disclosure, I don't listen to those podcasts at night. Like
Yeah.
that will bug me all the way out and I won't sleep.
Sure.
Um
Yeah.
so yeah, I just yeah. So but that and then yeah, it's just it's cool though. It's like if lore was really cool and Aaron Mankey loved Jesus.
Ye
Like
Well, isn't that crazy though? Because it's almost like the anti-lore, where it does the same thing, but lore, like at the end, it kind of, or not the end, but it basically like tries to explain everything away, you know?
yeah.
And this one is like, no, no, no. There's so much more going on,
There's
you
like
know?
there's this stuff's
It's like the
just like
opposite approach.
legitimately weird.
Yeah,
We're not gonna you
yeah.
can't explain this away. But my last sort of like piece of media to report on is it's a band
Okay,
and it's a couple albums like and these are the only like they have three albums. I think the first one is called You Are Not Alone, but I don't know where you can find it anymore. I
okay,
used to own all three albums, but it's a side project from a couple of guys, and I've probably talked about this before, but it's a side project from a couple guys from Five Iron Frenzy.
okay.
The band's called Brave Saint Saturn, and
Mm,
the albums in particular are that I've been listening to them a little bit here and there, but it's The Light of Things Hoped For and Anti Meridian, and
hmm,
I just really one I like Reese Roper's vocals.
mhm.
I think, and he primarily does almost all the vocals. I think there's a song or two on each one of these where he's not the vocalist, but he's got like a we used to call it the with in Five Iron he does a lot of like basically I would call squealing, but it's
Okay.
entertaining squealing. Um, and even there it's kind of artful, but in this like he's just got um, I like his vocals, I like his style,
Mhm,
and but I also I think there's some really artful songs, like artfully written songs. I'm thinking Estrella from the Light of Things Hoped For um,
mm,
is really, and again, it's sort of like your sad boy emo. Like these are songs that
mhm.
like these are some of these songs are like they're tied to heartstring moments, and they just like I was listening to Estrella and especially in the light of like this Estrella is about loss and about the passing of a friend. But
Okay,
we
yeah.
we lost a saint, one of an older saint at my church passed on not too long ago, and just you know, it's not like he and I were super tight, but we were friends, and I cared about him and I liked him, and just thinking about the fact that he's not like he's in glory, he's you know he's entered into his reward, but just like the loss on this side, not just for
Hmm.
his wife, but for our church body, like that's our friend and our brother. And just like, we found out that not, and again, not too long ago, that another friend of Megan and I, like, we just found out, like, and we had sort of lost touch with her, but she passed away in September. And it's just like, so it's like I was listening to that song actually tonight, and I was just like, "Ugh,"
Mm,
kind of like, Ugh.
yeah.
um but they're really kind of interesting albums. They're pretty different than Five Iron. um and yeah,
Hmm.
so yeah, they're
Nice.
they're they're like synth alt rock, a little poppy kind of.
Okay.
They're different. It's good. It's just, but if you're expecting like Five Iron, if you're looking for Five Iron Frenzy, just go listen to Five Iron Frenzy. Like, this
Yeah.
is not, this is not like that. It's very different.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I like those albums, and I just think, like, as a general rule, like, I would have liked to have seen more from that particular project, because
Mm.
I think they had like a cool sound. Um, there's just and there's a couple standout tracks. There's a couple standout, in my opinion, there's a couple standout tracks on each one of them, but overall the albums I think are pretty good. So
Nice. Nice. I'll
yeah,
need to check him out.
yeah,
That sounds pretty cool.
yeah. But I'm glad that we took this time to talk about like things that aren't video game related that we're into, but we are a
Mhm.
video game podcast, and we should probably take a couple of minutes to just talk about what
Mm.
we've been playing.
Mm.
So, what have
Good
you been
idea.
playing, my guy?
Good idea. Well, been not too much, honestly. So I think I can fly through this pretty quickly. But the games that I have been, kind of dabbling in off and on are Shin Megami Tensei, Devil Survivor 2, Record Breaker. Still making my way through that. Still have quite a bit to go, so I'm sure that I'll just be coming back to that one and enjoying it. There's still, well, we'll talk about more as we talk about Vanillaware. There, art direction, some character designs are just like, man, does that have to be that way? But other than that, good game so far. Enjoying it. Kind of crazy humanity. What happens when there's a cataclysm, and how does humanity react to that? And what are both from a micro level, kid loses their parents, and a macro level of like, okay, well, who's in the right? Should the government hoard food and ration food, and should that go to the people who are doing work for to figure out what's going on, or should it go to everyone, or should people see the hoarding of food as government overreach, and therefore break into government buildings in order to take the food back for the people? All this, a bunch of like stories like that, which is kind of crazy. It's
Hmm.
cool stuff going on there. Other one that been dabbling in, but again, still have quite a while to play through, is Pokemon Legends Arceus. Having fun with that one. Yeah, it's a different kind of Pokemon game where you have to think more along the lines of missions. Yeah, kind of a mission focus. Find new Pokemon, research them, all this kind of stuff, not just purely battling. Although that's something that you're going to want to do as well. So enjoying that game. I'm sure I'll have more to say about it when as I progress through the game. Finally, I did start up the Talos Principle, playing that one on PC, but playing it with a controller, and it's been fun. It is a puzzle game with just some weird kind of. This kind of cliche to reference it, but I will anyways. Kind of do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep kind of feel. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you're this android, but what does it mean? And how did this happen? And who is this person talking to me? And should I be doing what I'm being told to do, or should I try and do something else? I don't know. Let's just see where this takes me. For right now, I'm going to do some puzzles. But then the game hits you with, oh, humans are kind of crazy, like weird creatures, because you give them a knot and they'll try and untie it, like just naturally. They'll try and figure out, make games for themselves, and they will try and figure out puzzles and things like that.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh dang it, game, you're trying to break the fourth wall on me, and you're trying to tell me what to do without telling me what to do, and I don't know if I like it. Anyways, Talos Principle, it's very interesting. I'm only a couple hours in. It, because it's a puzzle game, it does have some of those elements of like, it's all smooth sailing until it's not, and
Yeah.
then you start to get frustrated, and then you figure it out, and it's like, oh, that wasn't worth getting frustrated over, but it was frustrating in the moment. So how do you overcome that? I don't know. I don't know, but I'm enjoying it. So that's where I'm
Yeah.
at so far.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts. I know you have some more thoughts on it,
Hmm.
because my score has not changed at all. I'm still at -1 for the year. But Nate, you've got some games to report on, and you can share some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. Well, I too am playing the Talos Principle,
Hmm.
and it's anytime I play like a puzzle heavy game, I think of and again, this is sort of like one of the I reference the New Girl the way most people reference The Office, but I think
Okay.
about
Yeah. Yeah.
Winston and how he just gets puzzling. Um,
Okay.
you know, it gets a little awkward and kind of Winston and puzzles are kind of like me and puzzles.
Okay.
We like when one actually, and so I'm enjoying it, and it's very much that when it's smooth sailing up until the point where it isn't, and
Yeah.
there have been a couple puzzles that I've come up to, and I'm like, what? What are you doing? There's been some really like it's kind of cool because it does a lot with very little. Um,
Yeah.
and I really do appreciate that. So I'm
Hmm.
enjoying it so far. I'm probably I think a little farther than you are at this
Yeah. It
point in
sounds like
time.
it. Hmm.
Uh, and so it's like I'm starting to see some of the story unfold.
Okay.
And if it's going where I think it is, I'm like, oh, I bet the people who wrote it felt terribly clever at the time. Um,
Okay.
but I'm also like, I don't know. Like I'm one of those people that like sometimes like I watch a movie and I'm like, that's the bad guy. Like, I take like it's like 3 seconds into it and I'm like, nah, that dude did it. Like, and people are like, how did you know? Have you watched this before? And I'm like, nah, I'm just telling you that dude did it. Like
It was Kaiser Soze the whole time.
that one I did like I gotta be honest, like I did not see Kaiser Sose coming. Um that one got
Yeah.
me. But yeah. So it's one of those things, but I'm enjoying it, but yeah, it's a
Hmm.
puzzle game, so it's like that comes with its own like pitfalls and but yeah,
Yeah.
it's we will have more thoughts on that eventually at some point in time. Uh
Yes, we
but
will.
yeah, it's enjoyable so far, but I like the way you said it. It's like it's smooth sailing up until it isn't, and then
Hmm.
it's like everything comes to just a screeching halt and you're like, "What?" Um
Yeah.
but in a completely different tack, I've fired up a couple different things, so I've got my locked and loaded list. And just as a full
Hmm.
disclosure, like I had made after a little bit of a conversation with you, I had made a small amendment. Instead of tackling both of the nonary games or both of the games in the nonary collection, I'm just going to be tackling 999. Um, just because like it's not that I don't want to play the other one, but with as much as is on my plate, and some of this is my own fault, but uh, and that's the only change I will make to that list. But I also put Metaphor Refantasio in that list, which may have been a mistake.
Hmm.
But I like when we were having a conversation off mic, it's like I you said you wanted to like challenge yourself and like actually kind of like
Hmm.
put real stakes on it, and there's a chance that I might not get this list done. Um,
Right.
so, so in addition to that, I did sort of, there are two games from that list that I've kind of been like circling around and actually putting some like half decent time into, and it's
Okay.
Astrobot, which is
Oh,
just
nice.
such a delight. Like
Hmm.
I completed, I pretty much like 100%ed like the first galaxy kingdom, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
And just, yeah, that game is such a like it really is, it really is like a reason to own a PS5. Like
Okay.
I hate
Hmm.
saying that like that way. It's not like one $70 game or whatever, or $60, however much it is. I don't know. I bought it
Mhm.
day one, so I don't think it's like a full $70 game. But anyways, unless you get the like the super special edition. But
Gotcha.
it is definitely a must play in my opinion. It's an absolute delight. It's just, and it's so nice to see Sony kind of getting back to like doing something that isn't Sad Dad Simulator or, you
That's true.
know,
Yeah.
like third person over the shoulder action adventure puzzle epic quest kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, so it's really refreshing and really pretty charming. And as much as I love like that heavier kind of like, because I do like that stuff, it's like it's
Yeah.
also
Yeah, yeah.
refreshing to have something that just isn't that. That's
A
like,
mascot platformer.
well, and it's fun and it's
Yeah.
smart and it's like it's a little risky and it's just
Okay.
it's so much of like what, and again, like it's so much of what Sony isn't doing in a lot of ways, where it doesn't
Right.
take
Yeah,
itself
yeah,
too
yeah. That makes
seriously.
sense.
It's not this prestige piece. It's just it's gorgeous and it's fun and it's just like just oodles and oodles of charm. Um,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
yeah, so I'm really I'm really enjoying that. I'm really cherishing my time with that. It's something that Byron likes to watch it a little bit. Now, of course,
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
he's 2 years
Right.
old, so he has like the attention of a goldfish sometimes.
Mhm.
But like
Yep.
sometimes he'll just sit on my lap. The hard part is though, he also wants to like press the buttons on my controller while I'm playing,
Yep.
which there's some sequences there are already some sequences where I'm like, I kind of want to get the platform or the platinum for this, but there's been like a few like one-off levels and some sequences where I'm like, I just don't know. Like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
really want to like sweat this that bad.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a delight. And something
Sweet.
that is a complete 180 from that perspective. I'm also playing Doom
Yeah.
Eternal,
There you
which
go.
is the
Another
one
mascot platformer.
of, of a sort. Yes. Um, there is there's first person 3D platforming, which I have very strong thoughts on. uh
Mhm.
Listen, like if I could, if any developer ever hears this, don't do that. It's a
Mhm.
terrible idea and it sucks and you should
Mhm.
feel bad. Like, if you want me to do platforming, give me a third person camera for those segments. Like, I'm not asking you to like change your game. I'm just saying, like, in first person, like there's something about that that I hate. I hate it
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
It's just awful.
I think that's
Outside,
why modern games have moved to that parkour, and maybe that's just because I just played Titanfall 2.
hmm
But I think that's like the way around it
hmm
is like just give me the ability to like it's just a little it's rounding off those corners. Like,
yeah.
okay, now I can run on walls, I don't have to make it
Like if I get
exact.
like, yeah, if
Right.
I get like close enough to the edge, I can like scramble up it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have to. Yeah. Um, and it hasn't been like completely insurmountable, but it definitely, Doom Eternal definitely has like a much different vibe to it than
Okay. Hmm.
2016. Like,
Okay.
it's still like kind of like the arenas are still like that sort of like that murder chess kind of thing, which
Hmm.
is awesome. But there's just like this game, it doesn't it doesn't feel as arcadey as
Oh,
2016
okay.
did,
Hmm.
where 2016 didn't feel like it had the stakes that Eternal does. Like with the
Okay.
traversal, like Eternal is a much richer game. There's a lot more
Hmm.
to it, and
Yep.
there's more traversal options. There's a whole bunch of different tools in your kit now. Um, and I'm not sure that like I would say like right now I probably prefer 2016. I'm not. It's not to say
Okay.
like, oh,
Yeah.
like I hate Eternal. It's like
Hmm.
I'm like, when it clicks, it's like super fun, but um I prefer 2016 because it doesn't, like, Eternal requires more from the player, I think, than 2016 did, but that's just
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Makes sense.
so yeah, but it's good. Like,
Hmm.
it's pretty sick. It's definitely can't play that with Byron watching.
Yeah.
um So, but yeah, it's that's really all. Like, and I guess like we probably. So my score hasn't changed either. I haven't picked anything up though. I have been side eyeing Hades 2 real hard.
Okay.
Um,
Going in on that
real.
early access.
I kind of want to.
Hmm.
I might. I want to hold off though.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, because like, listen, let's just be like wherever I buy it first. That's probably where I'm going to spend the most amount of time with it.
Hmm.
So I might just wait for full release. But yeah, I haven't really been playing anything, or I haven't been playing much else. Well, not anything significantly.
Okay.
My score hasn't changed, but I do feel like we need to settle this. So
Mm.
the Epic Disney pickup or the
Yes.
Epic Mickey rebrushed pickup,
Hmm.
should I count that as an acquisition or not? Because it is. I mean, and like
Yeah.
this can just be binding. Like whatever we decide here can just be binding. Like, you, me and John have kind of been having a conversation,
Hmm.
and I don't think that we've really pinned it down.
Right.
Um, I'm willing to take the acquisition point for it, but at the
Hmm.
same time, I'm also kind of like, I shouldn't have to, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I'm going to say no, you shouldn't have to take the point for it.
my man.
In cases where there are games that and I think we can make that amendment of just okay, remakes or excuse me, remasters basically. If there's no substantial gameplay changes, then you can treat it as the same game. I think by and large that's fine. I'm also of the opinion that it's fine to leave that up to the person who buys it as well. If you
Yeah.
want to consider it a new game, that's fine too, because that could be advantageous if you plan on completing it. Like, okay, that's fine. I just think that determination needs to be made when you purchase the game. So full disclosure, I didn't even mention this on the podcast, but I'll just mention it here. Actually, it's in my background. Is that I picked up the Metal Gear Solid collection on Switch, Volume 1, because it was on sale, but I didn't take any points for it because I own the HD collection on PlayStation
Which
3.
is the
I
same,
just
those
wanted,
same three games, three or
yeah,
four games. Yeah.
I just wanted to own it on a console that like I actually have hooked up, not my PS3 basically.
And that's
So
like the
I don't.
exception, like for those
Mhm.
things where it's like, if
Yeah,
you already own this stuff and you're
yeah,
just trying to get like, and this is like a beatdown rule that, well, that we actually didn't have canon.
mhm,
Like it wasn't in the rules apparently.
mhm,
Because I think we had kind of put a pin in it and never come back to it. But if you already own the game and it's on like either dead hardware or whatever, and a remake is issued, and again, it's the different, or the a remaster rather, and what we're saying is the differentiation is like a remaster can be like minor quality of life stuff with
mhm,
like with it could be even significant graphical upgrades, as long as the
yeah,
core gameplay loop too isn't shifted too much, as long as there aren't serious substantial changes to the actual game, the
mhm,
mechanics, the story, etc. Those games can be reacquired with no penalty.
yeah. Yeah, you can just treat them as the same games. I'm totally fine with that. And yes, it's a gray area because I think there are games that are more cut and dry, like we've referenced before. Resident Evil 2 Remake, I think, is a different game than Resident Evil 2, the original one. Same with the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Remake games, are substantially different than their original
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII. I see those as different games altogether. So you play with those differently, but I think there are also games that kind of toe the line. I would have said games that are made from the ground up, but last year's, I think it was last year, or maybe the year before that, Super Mario RPG when it came out on Switch.
Mm,
Technically, that was a ground up remake,
that was a ground up remake.
but it's still
Yeah.
the same game. So I don't consider it any different. So it is a gray area. It's something that kind of differs game to game, which is why I'm fine with just leaving that up to whoever purchases the game to make that decision. But at the same time, yeah, I think there are clear cut cases. I think in the case of Epic Mickey, there's not enough that's added outside of
Yeah.
some new cosmetics, maybe a new way, you know, ability or two, but it's still the same game in my mind. So
Yeah.
I'm fine
And that
with not.
and that's the whole thing is it's sort of primarily the use case for that sort of exception or whatever you want to
Mhm.
call it. It's like dead hardware, or not even dead hardware, but just like you own it for I owned it for the Wii.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hook up my Wii U just to play Epic Mickey, but hey, if I can put it on my PlayStation, I might
Mhm.
actually play it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And they're right. So
anyways, so
yeah.
that would put my score. I'm still sitting at -3 then.
Cool.
So I'm
Cool.
yeah, but
Nice. Well done, man.
yeah, I'm feeling okay about that.
Make it a good
Um,
year.
yeah, so far, it's now I need to keep that momentum. Just
Right.
got to keep that momentum.
Yeah.
But if you guys listen, if this is your first time listening or watching us, and you're like, "What's this backlog beatdown?" The negative numbers and everything. It's a meta that we run. It's kind of just it's a tool to encourage you to play the stuff that you already own and
Mhm.
sort of throttle back on just acquiring new titles. If
Yep.
you're interested in sort of looking at the rules, reach out to us. You can find us in the Discord server. We don't have the 2025 rule set written out yet. We are still kind of working on it. Like, there's some minor tweaks. Again,
Mhm.
we're sort of figuring that stuff out in the background, but the 2024 rules are up. They're in our Discord. We can get you a link, and there aren't too many differences for this year,
Mhm.
with a few exceptions. But so Backlog Beatdown is cool. The official app of the Backlog Beatdown is GG over there by our friend Charles Watson. He's a
Mhm.
cool dude. We like him. We like the GG app, and we think you should check it out. Uh, Other things that you should check out, right? It's hey, if you're a longtime listener or watcher and you've done the sharing and the caring, you've done the rating and reviewing, and if you haven't done those things, do those things, because that would make you even cooler. We have a Patreon, just like so many other podcasts out there, and I've read in places like, don't tell people it's a tip jar. It's kind of a tip jar. Like, if you like what we're
Mhm.
doing and you want to go a little bit above and beyond, we have a Patreon, but it is a Patreon with perks. Each patron gets early and uncut access to each and every episode. There is an exclusive podcast solely for the patrons called the Bro Hang,
Mhm.
although we are debating on whether or not we should call it Between Two
Plus
Bros, um, which just amuses us to no end.
Mhm.
Uh, in addition to that, each and every patron has the option to recommend a game or a topic for us to do an episode on, and then join us in on for that episode if they so desire. Um, they also just got like a lot more input, a lot more access to us. So yeah, and they're cooler than you. Like, if you aren't a patron, sorry, it's science. It's science. They are at least 25% more cooler than non-patrons. Like,
Mhm.
it's you can't argue with the science. Just
Nothing I
saying.
can do. It's
You
science.
can't. Sorry. But again, and it's if you like what we're doing, and it's a way for you to partner with us if you're if you're at all interested in doing that. That being said, lastly, but certainly not leastly, we are a proud, well, mostly proud member of the Playwell Network alongside our friends over there. You got Paul Lytle, the Techno Funk Boy, Wesley Ray, the Henshin Dad himself, and the Wonder from Down Under, Porcho. They each have podcasts that are dedicated to exploring, well, the idea of playing well and how we can do that. We love those guys. We love their content, and we think you should check it out. So here's a word from one of them.
This is Phil from Phil's Gaming Emporium. We have all your retro needs and are a proud sponsor of the Play Well Network. In honor of you getting pwned, we are offering a cheap backlog reduction sale. Just request our services with the promo code BACKLOG half off for 50% off our backlog services. After that, we simply send you a package for you to put your backlog in, and once the mail carrier comes, your backlog is gone. It's like magic. You have a clean slate and room for more games that you can order from our website, Phil's Gaming Emporium.
And we're back. All right, folks. So now you've sat through the first half of the show, all the preamble, all the media reporting, all the backlog report stuff, all of it, like all of it. It's you're here for now it's time for the beef. You want to know where's the beef, where's the meat, and here it is. So that was pretty anticlimactic,
steaming
wasn't it?
Pile of beef.
It was just it's vanilla.
A
It
roast.
reminds me of for some reason, you said the way you said that, and what popped in my head was that scene from Friends where Rachel makes the custard, but it's also got like beef and frozen peas and peas and carrots in it too, and it's disgusting, but Joey loves it, and he's like,
Nice.
Custard, good. Jam, good. Beef, good. And it's just like, yeah, our meat, good. And it was like, but for whatever reason, that's what popped in my head. It was weird association. I don't even like Friends. I think Friends is garbage television. There's a hot take.
That's not here.
I think that completely
totally
non-controversial.
Yeah.
But but we're going to be talking about.
I think it's vanilla.
Hey-o! You went there again. We're going to be talking about Vanillaware, which is anything but vanilla, really. I think this is a pretty outstanding studio with maybe one or two sort of semi-glaring omissions. Mostly a design choice in one particular title, but we'll get there when we get there. So, but Josh, it looks like you got some stuff pulled up there. So why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of Vanillaware here, friend?
Yeah, so Vanillaware is a Japanese studio. It is known mostly by one of its creators. Okay, I believe last I had heard, or at least in my research, that there are 29 people employed at Vanillaware. So it's a small Japanese studio, but one of the original creators is also he does a lot of the art design as well. His name is Joji Kamatani, or he goes by George Kamatani. And so some of the distinctive style of a lot of the games comes from this guy. There's a whole story that we don't necessarily have to go into, but he's been in the video game space since he was a teenager. Part of it, I don't want to go to. This is a family-friendly podcast, right? I will say that he worked on some adult material in video games early on in his career. That might inform some of his design choices and help to kind of understand some of the choices that he makes. Unfortunately, however, I think this helps to frame Vanillaware as a studio in my mind because of their striking art design in general. Both for good, mostly good, but also for bad at times. But I think when you see a Vanillaware title, you recognize that it is Vanillaware. One fun little anecdote about the name Vanillaware. I didn't know this until I started kind of researching for this episode. The reason it's called Vanillaware, Joji himself had said that vanilla is the best-selling, most endearing flavor of ice cream. So he wants to make video games that are well known, that endure throughout time, that are very well crafted, so that they can be kind of time honored and go on, so that he can have a legacy. The same way that vanilla ice cream is known as like the ice cream flavor, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? Unfortunately, here in English, vanilla is also kind of a euphemism, kind of, milk toast.
For bland or boring,
right?
Or just like middle of the road, and which is kind of like when you have a really good vanilla ice cream.
Yeah,
it's like I think it's like it's kind of like it's default ice cream is what people think of, but it's like really good vanilla is outstanding.
Yes,
like there's like basic and boring vanilla, but a good vanilla ice cream is vanilla's got like is a good flavor.
Yeah, totally agree. Like vanilla Tootsie Rolls, so good. Come on, man. Anyway, the little blue ones. Anyways, I
Okay.
completely agree, and I think that's
That
what
is
he's going for.
a weird take. I did not know about it. But like I like the orange ones personally.
Oh, the orange ones are good too. Yeah.
Like I like the orange ones, and you take them. Actually, with the vanilla or with the chocolate.
Ooh, I don't know that
And
I've ever done that before, but with the
oh, dude,
vanilla and the orange, yeah,
you get
creamsicle
like
in your
a
mouth.
little bit of creamsicle action going on.
I
I
love
also
it.
like chocolate and orange. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a
yeah,
big thing
interesting.
for me. So
Oh man, these are some great combinations, but the game studio Vanillaware, that's where they came up with the name
okay,
for the studio. This studio has also had a good number of ups and downs throughout its history. It came up out of the ashes of a previous studio that George had started, that basically went bankrupt. And throughout its history, throughout releasing different games, they have run out of money a couple of times. So they've always been kind of on the edge. And it's funny, just as I've looked over their games, they actually haven't released as many games as I assumed that they had. Um, Only a handful of games, especially here in North America. But it isn't until recently where they've really kind of done well financially. I say that Odin Sphere did really well, but they almost immediately kind of blew all their money on the next game. But anyways, we can get into some of that as we talk about each of the games as they come up. But it is an interesting studio. I'd say outside of kind of who they are and what they do, this Japanese studio with this striking art style, I would say, and you can push back on this if you want to, it seems like a Japanese corollary, I would say, to oh my goodness, of like Supergiant games, where they have a very like you can tell a Supergiant game. It's not a big studio, but what they do, they really pour into the quality of the game, and it just has a very distinct feel for it. It's just in this case, it's very Japanese.
yeah, I can see that. I don't. Yeah, it's not like a 1-to-1 or 100% corollary, but I can definitely see that they're both they have very distinct products that it's
Hmm.
like, oh no, this is a Vanillaware game, this is a Supergiant game,
Yeah.
like, and you can see they have their sort of own distinctives.
Right. Right. Even when they try something like totally different
Mhm.
mechanically,
Yeah,
it still feels like that type of game. That's what I've heard about Pyre. I've never actually played Pyre, but it still feels super giant.
yeah.
Whereas a lot of the Vanillaware games have that feel as well.
No, and I would say like I think both of them. I wouldn't even say like both of them are very visually distinct.
Hmm.
Um, like I think that the primary sort of mark on a Vanillaware game, just sort of like even looking at the Supergiant versus Vanillaware comparison, is the primary distinction with Vanillaware is the just their art style. They've
Hmm.
got a pretty the design philosophy and the key artists, like they've got a pretty uniform style. Like
Hmm.
I'm trying to, but whereas I would say one of the key distinctives for Supergiant is the music. Supergiant's
Okay. Yeah,
music is always
that's
like
fair.
the distinguishing thing. Like it's just, even though each one of the games has a uniquely distinct soundtrack and style and vibe, it's like, oh no, like as soon as I hear that, I'm like, that's got like Supergiant. I can't remember their music director's name off the top of my head, but
Mm,
it's like
yeah.
it's one guy's like singular vision, and I would even say like, and that's sort of like the parallel is that Vanillaware, it's George's singular vision that as far as like the visual aesthetic,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
it really defines and informs everything. So yeah, there, and I would say like both of them too. The other parallel, and again, now that you've got me kind of thinking about this, is that
Hmm.
both of them tend to make sort of like these cult classics. Up until Hades, uh, Supergiant stuff was like beloved, but
Hmm.
not critically successful. Like
Okay.
Not even no. It was critically successful, and I think it was like successful to a certain extent, but it wasn't like explosive. Like I think Hades really kind of like Hades was a big stinking deal and made
Right.
them a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't, and I know Odin Sphere was pretty popular, but I don't know that Vanillaware has kind of hit that. And I haven't looked at the numbers. I've heard Unicorn Overlord did pretty well for them as
Yeah.
well.
Hmm.
But again, I think they're both sort of like kind of hit that like these are cult classic kind of games
Yeah.
where it's like they have a pretty rabid fan base, but it's not the explosive success that bigger, more mainline titles kind of hit. Like
That's true. I don't think it's necessarily like mainstream. Unicorn Overlord, I feel like would be kind of the biggest, the closest that they've gotten to mainstream success. But I think just the 1-2 punch of Aegis Rim and then Unicorn Overlord feels as though they actually have a lot of good momentum. Whereas Aegis Rim, yeah, I agree. It's a critical darling, but I don't know that it necessarily is. It is more of a niche game, and so I don't think it's something that everyone kind of jumped on. Oh, okay, yeah, Vanillaware is great. Also, I think they kind of toned down a little bit of the kind of the stylistic vision that they have. Now maybe that's just because it's supposed to be like that game is more centered around a time and place in Japan, or times and places, as opposed to the more fantasy settings of their previous games. But even Unicorn Overlord, I feel like the art direction was more toned down than some of the stuff that they've done in the past. But my understanding is that Unicorn Overlord was not directed by George. I believe it was one of the other directors there that did Unicorn Overlord. But
so both of them like, and here's it just like this is just like quick Google searches kind of thing.
Mhm.
But back in 2023 or 2023, Aegis Rim hit about a little over 1 million copies. I don't know how
Okay.
many. So that's a couple years ago. But all I can see as far as like sales numbers for Unicorn is it hit 1 million sales fairly shortly after its sort of release. But again, I
Wow.
can't find any more numbers.
Okay.
I'm not like digging. Anyways, so
Yeah.
and again, I think that sort of fits that like cult classic kind of narrative, where it's
Yeah.
like these are smaller, kind of more niche products.
Mhm.
But again, the fan bases are really pretty. I don't want to use the word rabid, but
Mhm.
they're ardent supporters of these products.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I would say that both of us kind of fall, maybe me more so than you, but
Mhm.
both of us kind of fall into that camp where we really like the stuff that Vanillaware has done.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely really interested in it. And that so there's just a couple things that I want to talk about real quickly. Now that we've talked about kind of who they are as a company, what makes their games special, and a lot of that to me revolves around the art because each game is different. Okay, and we'll talk about each game. But before we get there, I think kind of some through lines is the art styling is very striking and different. I think it is still obviously very Japanese, kind of that manga anime inspired art. But in the same way, I can't think of his name and I feel like a jerk. But the same, the artist who did Final Fantasy Tactics and that the way that is very striking. Um, but it's not only the art style, but I think the use of color as well within the artwork is also very striking. There's lots of bright colors that are used, especially with a lot of fantastical, some of the more fantastical games. So, and it's very lush and vibrant color throughout the artwork of a lot of these games. And then finally, it has to do with the animation as well, is that they are 2D games. So far, that's all that Vanillaware has made is only 2D games. But the way that they animate their characters is different than, frankly, almost anything else that I have seen in video games. Case in point, most of their characters are breathing when they're on screen. And the way that they animate that breath and the way that they take that 2D image and kind of distort it slightly to make it look as though the character is breathing, it feels, I don't know if I want to say storybook like, but it feels not even uncanny, slightly otherworldly, but you recognize like what it is, what it's trying to communicate, and it does it well, but in a way that's just different than things, the other things that I've seen. So those are
Yeah.
some hallmarks to me.
Yeah, now that you're talking about like the way that characters move, and there's sort of a fluidity, and
Hmm.
it's
That's
definitely
a good way
sort
of
of
putting it.
exaggerated,
Hmm.
like the breathing. It's like, yeah, it's very noticeable. Like, you don't breathe like that in real life, but
Hmm.
it does sort of add a little. It adds life to the screen, and I
Right.
think actually I would say like I think they do have like all of those games do have like sort of a storybook feel.
Okay.
I think that's actually like a good, and I think actually Odin Sphere
Hmm.
actually in some ways treats itself as a story.
Okay.
Yeah, part of the mechanic of Odin Sphere is like you're exploring these different like stories, and so
Hmm.
they're like that does tie in. But yeah, it's a very it I use this word a lot, but it just like it's a style that oozes charm,
Hmm.
and yeah, so yeah, that really is the key sort of hallmark is again that visual style, and it. But
Hmm.
then again, just we were talking a little bit off camera, and I just said even the way that dragons, crowns, backgrounds move, the way
Hmm.
that like it's really pretty striking. Um, there's a lot of visual flair in all of these games that I think, uh, frankly, you know, like a lot like it's probably one of my favorite things. It's
Yeah.
just like the it's not even attention to detail, like, but it's just there's a lot of care put into these sequences and just making like even the way characters move and everything else. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's yeah,
It is pretty funny that you're listening to a podcast where we're trying to describe
just go
the
Google.
special things. Right. I would say first, yeah, Google some of these games and pull up some images, but then also look at some gameplay because it also has to do with, you use the word fluidity. The fluidity of the characters in action is also another level of, I think, what makes this team especially unique and special. So, anyways, I wanted to touch on that before we dive into the games themselves. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these games. It is, being a Japanese company, Vanillaware has released a few games in Japan only that we're not really going to be talking about because neither of us have any experience with those games. I'm sure you can find English patches and do all that fun stuff if you really want to. But we did none of that in preparation for this episode because we just wanted to talk about our experiences and what we think about the games that we have played, not necessarily dig into games. Like one of these games is like an online PSP game that was never released over here. Like I'm never gonna play that, guys. Like it's just, I'm not interested in that at all. Um, well, I take that back. I'm slightly interested in it, but I'm not enough to actually put in the time to
Not
try
enough to
and look
figure
into
out
it.
how you can make that work. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, anyways, the first game, and this is, here's another interesting anecdote. Okay, the first two games that this studio released within a month of each other. Grim Grimoire and Odin Sphere, released within a month of each other in 2007 on PlayStation 2. The reason for that is because Odin Sphere, the first like major game that the studio created, was shelved. Sort of, it was pushed back by Atlas because when it was done, it would have. Atlas was saying it's going to interfere with our flagship game that we're releasing this year, Persona 3. And so it kind of needs to move out of the way until after our release cycle for Persona 3. So then Odin Sphere had a set date, and because the company wanted to work on something and needed an influx of cash, they started making another game, and that was Grim Grimoire. And Grim Grimoire had a 6-month development cycle. So in its original release, Grim Grimoire was not necessarily it wasn't as polished as as a lot of the other games that they made. They have since made a re-release, somewhat of a remake of the game in Grim Grimoire once more that retools a number of things in the game, or so I've heard. I've never actually played the game. And so that apparently is the version to play. It's kind of a take on StarCraft. It's a storybook.
It's a real-time strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, the devs within Vanillaware like to play StarCraft, and so they wanted to kind of make their own version of it. That was kind of the heart behind it. Again, 6-month dev cycle, so a bit of a smaller game, but I've heard it's charming in its own right. I think again the art style is pretty cool. Even if you can tell, it's not that it's not a full game, but it does not push too hard it doesn't dig into its systems as much as a lot of other games could, although that might not be the case for the remake that recently came out within the past couple of years. But Grim Grimoire came out, and then a month later, Odin Sphere came out. Everyone loved Odin Sphere. It sold really well, and they actually made money. So, have you played either have you played Grim Grimoire? I'll ask you that first.
I have not played a substantial amount. I owned it back on the PS2. I played a little bit of it. It didn't stick with me. Just because, like, listen, real-time strategy games on a console are always kind of tricky. So I'm interested in going back to it. But like I said, when that's the one, like, looking at their games here, that's probably the stateside games. That's probably the one I know the least about.
Okay.
I have played and or beaten everything else.
Okay.
So I've beaten, like, just sort of looking at the other list. It's Odin Sphere, Muramasa, Dragon's Crown, and 13 Sentinels. I have played and beaten Odin Sphere and Muramasa. I adore both of them. I've played Dragon's Crown, haven't beaten it yet, and same with 13 Sentinels. I'm probably about halfway through 13 Sentinels.
Okay,
I
nice.
think. But yeah, so I've played almost I've played everything that they've released stateside, but I haven't played enough of Grim Grimoire to have much of an opinion, and that was like 20 years ago. Or longer. Well, it says 2007, 2012. Wait, no, I'm just kind of like, full disclosure, I'm using Wikipedia here to sort of like give me a little bit. So 2002, 2006. So yeah, like 20 years ago.
Yep.
In that ballpark. So yeah. But Odin Sphere was kind of interesting, is that I did buy that. I actually owned that before I owned the original Persona 3.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to just checking here, because at the time I was really big into. I knew about, so I picked up Grim Grimoire because Nippon Ichi or NIS published that, and I used to buy pretty much anything that they published. Actually, they have some collections available on the Switch now of some of their older games that I want to go back and pick up, because I loved pretty much, like, I loved Disgaea, but I also really, Nippon Ichi was doing some really interesting stuff. I mean, in hindsight, it's pretty kind of samey. Lots of turn-based tactical RPG stuff, like, but I picked up Odin Sphere, and I remember just being completely obsessed with that game.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
got like it's a 2D side scrolling like beat 'em up, but it's
Hmm.
got some RPG elements, and it's got this. There's 5 or 6 different characters, and you play through their storylines, and you kind of like dip in and out of each one of the stories because it's not like there's a chronological timeline for all of them, but these 5 or 6 different stories are happening all at the same time.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's pretty special, pretty charming,
Mm.
and it's just it's a I don't think technically the gameplay is really like that impressive.
Okay.
At least I don't like. Now, I played it. I replayed it a few years ago, and I remember thinking it was like competent, and it was good, but
Hmm.
it wasn't like amazing. Uh,
Gotcha.
but yeah, I think it's just like it's charming game, really pretty great style. It's kind of set in this quasi Norse mythology kind of like it's a
Right.
telling of the Ragnarok saga,
Okay.
and
Okay.
kind of uh, it's very loosely based on Norse mythology and Ragnarok.
Sure.
So yeah, it's eh, yeah, but
Okay.
it's a great game. I I liked it so much that when they did the re-release, there was like a fancy steelbook version,
Hmm.
and I bought that because
Nice.
I like those things, and I like that game, and so yeah, in fact I pretty much bought that. I bought it on PS2. I bought it for my Vita. Well, I bought it for my Vita and for PS4, and then again the Steelbook. So I used to
Oh
do
wow.
that a lot.
Yeah.
I just buy like multiple
Double dipping.
copies of the same game. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
I want it on all the things. I do think too there was like crossplay between the
Okay.
Vita and the PS4 version.
Okay.
So like you could or cross save so that you could
Take it on the go.
take it on the go
Yeah.
and upload. So I do think I did a fair bit of that, but yeah,
There was a
I think
point to it.
Odin Sphere. Yeah, it wasn't just complete insanity. It was just mostly insane. Um, but Odin Sphere, like, it's really great. It's I think the common touch point though for you and I, we were both big fans of Muramasa,
Right.
and we
Right.
both think it's frankly criminal that they haven't brought that forward. But I was doing some digging around, and so it's like
Hmm.
they have
Hmm.
jumped around with publishers. Now, Atlas has
Right. Right.
done the majority of their publishing.
Hmm.
Atlas published, Atlas published Odin Sphere, but they also published 13 Sentinels and Unicorn Overlord.
Okay. Okay.
But in looking at this, Nipponichi did Grim Grimoire,
Hmm.
and Marvelous did Muramasa.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to just think. And so I'm thinking that it could be, and Dragon's Crown was also Atlas.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Wow. So Atlas got the ones that sold well, where because kind of the story behind this, and not to go into depth because I can't, frankly, is that they've just been a very volatile studio. They spend money lavishly on their dev cycles, like they kind of spare no expense when they're creating games, and so they're basically gambling on that their games are going to do well. It's what brought under some of the games. Odin Sphere is actually a spiritual successor to a game, Princess Crown, that came out in Sega Saturn in Japan that did not do well at all and basically bankrupted the company at the time. But George wanted to make a spiritual successor to that, and so they were working on Odin Sphere for a long time. But again, this thing with Atlas came up. Yes, we want to publish it, but we can't do it now. We're gonna have to kick the can down the road, and so they do this. They make Grim Grimoire, okay, and then someone else publishes it. You just said who it was. It wasn't Nipponichi, but it was
Marvelous.
Marvelous did Grim Grimoire. or was it
Oh no,
Nipponichi?
no. Grim Grimoire was Nipponichi.
Okay, there you go.
Muramasa was Marvelous.
So that's how, because they needed something else out, they went to a different publisher who published this game that was made in 6 months, or at least with the 6-month dev cycle. Excuse me. So then Odin Sphere comes out. They do pretty well with that. So it is funny to see like the different publishers, which also speaks to the time. We were there because we're older guys. But something like a Nipponichi was bringing out these games that you couldn't get here in the West very easily, especially if you didn't know Japanese and you didn't want to import stuff, which I never did. And still don't know Japanese. But that said, it's just a different landscape where things are more standardized now, especially. Even console region locking is not as much of a thing nowadays like it used to be.
Yeah.
To where it's easier to import games. It's easier to do a lot of these things, and so it is just a different market. You don't have to. I feel like the publishers don't have to do as much work to bring games over as much as they used to. Or nowadays, maybe it's because of the proliferation of the internet as well that just makes it to where we Westerners know about games coming out in Japan, something like that. But there's lots of releases that are kind of day and date Japanese and English as well. So anyways, all that to say is it's just a different kind of market that it's a little harder to kind of remember. Oh yeah, back in 2007, Japanese RPGs were not huge, and there was a chance that this niche Japanese game probably wouldn't come to America. Not even might not, but probably won't.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that never came stateside just as a general rule, and that's still the case to a certain extent. But like, I would say also to just kind of like think about what was dominating the what the sort of the highlights of the zeitgeist were. It was like Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City were like the big things.
Yeah.
It was also Final Fantasy 12, I think, dropped around that
Wow.
same time period.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and Final Fantasy, prior to Final Fantasy 7, Japanese, that side of Japanese devs, they just didn't get the attention, right?
Right.
And so you had things like, and again, like the Nipponichi especially was just like such a niche develop or publisher where they were just bringing over like, and again, there's obviously like Disgaea, and I think the Prinny characters have a series of games now as well. But I mean, the one that is sticking out to me that I'm thinking about is Phantom Braid, and or Brave, Phantom Brave.
Yeah.
And there are a couple others in there. Again, like they've re-released some of these games on Switch in collections, which, and again, I totally plan on picking all them up because there's just like there's something about the games of that era that is just, I think, completely. I think what I will say is like Odin Sphere is a little bit transcendent in the thing that it doesn't feel as much as a timepiece, like locked in that era.
Yeah.
Like that, it feels a little more timeless than some of these other games. But yeah, a lot of that stuff, like Grim Grimoire. And again, at some point in time, I'm probably going to pick up the remaster and play through that to like just to sort of go back and re-experience it. But like there was like games of a time and like the early aughts where it's like when you play that stuff, it's like it has a very distinct like, oh yes, like kind of vibe. And there was like a lot of weird JRPG stuff, but again, it was sort of more niche, like the Artanelico games were coming out at that point in time. I was also kind of obsessed with those. Those were a weird JRPG visual novel thing.
Okay.
But, anyways, yeah. So I'm just kind of like thinking, like I'm going back, like this is a little bit of a time machine for me, just thinking about Odin Sphere and that original. But yeah, like when this came out, like these were not the availability And
Mhm.
again, like just I think you said it is that we have like the internet now, and that in a lot of ways these things are just part of part of the scene. They're just like inherent,
Mhm.
But at that time they weren't. You couldn't take it for granted. There were a lot of things that, yeah, just even looking back, like to Bravely Default and
Mhm.
Pandora's Tower and
Oh yeah.
what was the other one? The Final Story or something like that.
The last story.
The
Yeah.
Last Story. That whole, there was like 3 or 4 games. Xenoblade Chronicles, I
Yep.
think.
Yep.
Like those 3 or 4 games, like none of those were slated for stateside release, and it was
Right.
this massive social media campaign to be
Mhm.
like, "Hey, we want this stuff. Bring it over."
Mhm.
Because it just like a lot of that stuff, a lot of that Japanese developed stuff hadn't seen a ton of success as
Right.
a general rule stateside.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And frankly, game, or excuse me, narrative adventures like those games, they cost more money to translate in order to
yeah.
bring over here. So, you
Well,
have to have kind of a expected sales numbers to at least recoup that cost.
I think like translation wasn't quite like now. Localization is much more robust than it
Mhm.
used to be.
Yeah.
I think there are like entire sub teams within studios that are just dedicated to that.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and that was not a concern, I think, then. Like back
Mhm.
then, it was like you would usually contract
Yep.
localization out. I'm trying to think of the Lunar games. There was a
Working designs.
Working Designs.
Yep.
Like that's,
Mhm.
yeah, Working Designs did historically, like that's what they did. They were just a localization outfit, and they got the
Right.
publishing rights for stateside and localized it and did. But yeah, there's something just anyways, just a
Yeah.
weird kind of like time in video game history.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, it plays into that. So last thing I'll say before we move on to the next game, because I feel like there's a lot to say about the next game, is that kind of the downside to the striking visuals and the striking art style of these games. It has to do with Grim Grimoire, and you can speak into Odin Sphere if this is the case. But with Grim Grimoire, it takes place in this magical school, kind of Harry Potter type setting. But there are some design choices throughout the game of certain characters. As I was looking at images of the game and some gameplay and stuff like that, I did notice there were some enemies that are scantily clad and put in positions that are overly sexualized. And it's very unfortunate because I do really like the art style. I like what George brings to the table in terms of his art style. But there are just certain choices that I absolutely do not like. And Nate had mentioned something even before we started recording of like, this is a type of game that if my wife walked into the room, that I'd have some explaining to do.
Yeah.
And so I'll say that there are characters like that in at least in Grim Grimoire, which is absolutely unfortunate. Like I don't like that exists. I don't like that that's in the game.
I would say that it's something where Odin Sphere doesn't feel tremendously fan servicey. It's a
Mhm.
little fan servicey.
Okay.
Like I mean, just it's a little bit, but it's not. There's a particular boss design. There's one particular boss design that's pretty, again, like, and I would just say it's kind of, yeah, that one particular boss fight I'm thinking of in Odin Sphere is a little, it's fan servicey, but it's also pretty grotesque. Well,
Mhm.
it's just like there's a lot of like this is a very Japanese studio, and
Yeah.
especially at this point in time, like what what that meant certain things. Like you were just going to get like fan servicey junk, where
Mhm.
it's like the women were going to be hypersexualized and kind of just always drawn in these kind of provocative positions.
Mhm.
It's inherent in like just they just leaned on fan service a lot.
Yeah.
And some of that is cultural. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that's like kind of just a flavor, and it's of so.
Yeah.
And I think Odin Sphere again is a little fan servicey. Not, I don't remember outside of like that one boss encounter. I don't remember anything like too grotesque. Yeah, and
Okay.
again, like Grim Grimoire, I do remember a little bit then. I think the biggest offender is probably Dragon's Crown.
Right. Yeah.
But
And we'll get to that. I just wanted to mention it because I didn't want to,
this is sort
just
of
in
a
case someone
thread.
looks into
Like
it.
this is like the big caution
Yeah.
is like even with 13 Sentinels, which is pretty tame for the
Mhm.
most part, they just kind of can't help but be a little tittillating.
Yeah. Pervy. Yeah.
Yeah, a little pervy. Like it's and it's not like horribly offensive from what I've seen. In
Oh, you're talking
13
about
Cent.
Aegis. It's like, I
Yeah,
think sometimes it can be, but
yeah,
not talking about Aegis. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Dragon's Crown
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Odin
That's the offender.
Sphere. Like Dragon's Crown is just like there are two characters that I think just flat out Christian men, especially
Mhm.
probably should not pick if they play that game.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's just me. Like maybe somebody could play those two character types and be just fine. I'm not the one that you would have to justify that to,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
But I said with Odin Sphere, and 13 Sentinels, again, it's a little, there's like little fan servicey stuff, but it's not the over the top, just insane kind of like what,
Yeah.
that, some
Yeah.
of what Dragon's Crown brings out.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Cool.
but
Good to know.
I think the game that you were kind of alluding to was Muramasa. That
Right. Yes.
like we're both big fans of this one, and I think
Mhm.
here's what I'll say, Josh. I think if you like Muramasa,
Mhm.
you'd really like Odin Sphere.
Okay.
Because they share a lot of the same DNA. Like I
Mhm.
think Muramasa is probably a little tighter,
Okay.
and it's a little it's got, I think, some more interesting systems than Odin Sphere,
Mhm.
but they've kind of got the same heart.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes it
So
because they're both, obviously all these games are 2Ds, but are 2D games, but they're both kind of not even hack and slash, but kind of,
they're 2D brawlers,
yeah,
platforming brawlers. Like
Mm-hmm. And so they do share at least those mechanics in common. But Muramasa, the Demon Blade, I played it on Wii. And it's funny, I remember, brings back memories for me, is that when I first got my Wii, which was kind of like getting back into video games after I had gotten married and, just something to pass the time. I used to like video games because there was a while, a few years where I just wasn't playing anything, focusing on other stuff. But I see a Wii for say, $40 or whatever. Okay, I'll pick that up. And then, and so I go looking around to see, okay, what are some of the highest rated games for this system, and what can I pick up for cheap and whatever. And so I find this game, Muramasa. It's highly rated, and again, Vanillaware. Love the art style. Muramasa is it's a 2D brawler. And it is set in feudal Japan, and it uses a lot of Japanese like folklore, with its enemy designs and
you're
boss
fighting
designs and
Oni.
things like that. Yes, that's right. Demon Blade. There you go. And you're cooking up meals and you're forging different blades and
That's
things like that.
something you kind of I don't want to spend too much time, but like
Mhm.
the food in the food design and presentation in
Yeah.
Vanillaware is always top shelf. It's
Yeah.
always just like you look at that and you're like, I would eat that.
Uh-huh.
I,
Right.
it like the food stuff always makes me like the different like meal sequences or whatever. Like when they show the dish, I'm like, I'm kind of hungry now. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's so yeah.
Yeah.
So
It is.
it's like it's a weird sort of like little note, but if you play a Vanillaware game, you'll see what I mean, where it's just like when they're like, hey, like, because there's like a food mechanic in Odin Sphere too, where it's like you can visit
Okay.
restaurants and sort of order dishes, and yeah,
Okay.
so
And it is a decent little chunk of the game in
mhm.
Muramasa as well, is the cooking mechanic that you use throughout the game. So um anyways, I really loved this game. Apparently I don't remember this, but apparently in researching again, it's a short game. It's only, 5 hours for each character, each one. So
That's
not
if
very
you're
long at all.
burning through the campaign, but a
I
lot
guess
of
so,
times,
yeah.
I mean, I remember playing same levels multiple times
Yeah.
just because, like, you're grinding for resources because there's this whole upgrade system with the swords
Mhm.
and everything, or the blades and everything else that, yeah, um, it can be pretty grindy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but
it can. It can. But I mean it feels very good too.
yeah,
It's fast and fluid and numbers are going up as you're attacking people and
mhm.
and it's very stylish as well. I think of when your sword breaks on you and just a little animation of the snapping blade that appears up on the screen. It just feels really good and I mean frankly it's one of my favorite games on the Wii for sure and it's just I've got nothing but good memories for this
Yeah,
game, and even looking into it, it makes me want to replay it.
and it's kind of a shame because like out of all of the library stateside, that's the one that there's no great way to play it now.
Mhm.
It's either it's trapped on the Wii, or there was the PSP port, and that's where I played it. I played on the
It's a Vita
PSP,
port, but
or
yes.
the Vita port, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's where I played it, and yeah, it's just like I remember just being absolutely smitten with that game and being like, oh yeah, like it's like I actually I played Muramasa Demon Blade, and then I found out the Odin Sphere stuff was coming back, and they was like,
Okay.
I was like, get hyped. I was like, yes, like
Yeah.
give me all of that again. Um, so yeah, it's but Muramasa, it's just charming, and actually, like, I wouldn't even say the fact that it's like a short playthrough. I don't think that's a bad thing. Like
Mhm.
as I've gotten like a little older, and I'm just like, and again, the often repeated refrain from me is like, yeah, games are too long. Like that
Mhm.
game's too long. Like we were just talking about Sakana, where I'm like, yeah, it's like 15, maybe 20 hours too long. And I'm like, give me something that's snappy, like 10, 15 hours, and I
Mhm.
can sort of like get in, get out. And I'm now that we're talking about even, I'm like, man, I
Just want
might
to play it again.
go dig out my Vita and charge it up and just see if I
Yeah.
can sort of like roll through this again.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I think, like I said, it's practically criminal. And I would imagine, if I had to guess, I would imagine that one of the reasons, I mean, I don't know what kind of numbers that game sold. I
Mhm.
mean, it was on the Wii, and
Ri
so
Yeah, it did not do very well.
okay.
At least, yeah, not on the Wii because it's very different for the style of games that were on the Wii.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it did not do very well, and then they released it on the Vita, and I don't know how well it did on the Vita. I can't imagine it would do that great just because of the install base.
It's
But
just it's and again, it's that kind of the I'm just googling.
mhm. Well,
uh
since you're googling, I'm going through just some key art for the game, and as I'm looking at some of the characters, I'm remembering, okay, there are some character designs in this as well, female designs that are very exaggerated. I don't think it's too over the top like some other games, but it is exaggerated.
No,
Okay,
it's a
there's
little
still
more
some fan
it's
service.
it's definitely more subdued than like um
Yeah, I
Dragon's Crown, but that's like easy.
right,
Like
yeah, pretty much any video game is more subdued than Dragon's Crown.
um
Dragon's Crown is very much in your face, but yeah, it's
yeah, I can't find any sales numbers. No easily accessible sales numbers for Muramasa, but yeah. So
yeah. Uh, So it's funny. I really enjoyed this game. I don't really have much anything else to say that comes to mind, except that I really like the game. Like, it's definitely in my top 100.
If you and I think what I would say is, if you enjoy, like, to the listeners, to the viewers, if you enjoy 2D side scrolling, like sort of beat 'em up platformy kind of games, Odin Sphere and Muramasa will not disappoint. Like,
Mhm.
they're a good time.
Yeah.
Like, they're clever, they're mechanically not super robust, but not absolutely dead. Like, they're kind of like that middle ground. Like when we were talking about Sakano of Rise and Ruin, it was like the combat's good. It's not like it's not super difficult or super punishing or super technical.
Mhm.
It's good. It feels good, but it's not the most interesting thing. Where it's like it's
Mhm.
good. It's not great, but it's good, and good is okay. And it's just like they're visually just absolutely, they're just some of the most striking games that you'll ever see. I think too, like, they just ooze style.
Yeah.
They ooze style and charm, and it's just like, okay, like, and I'm not always a sucker for that, but when I bite, I like that hook just sinks. Like, just
Mhm.
they kind of got me by the, got me, and they're just dragging me around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would just say that that's like, so yeah, I again, if you like 2D side scrolling platformers, like, it's an easy recommend for me on both of these. Like, and they go like, Odin Sphere goes on sale fairly often.
Mhm.
And usually it's not that hard to, like, you could probably go to your local game store and find a copy for reasonable. I can't imagine it being super, super cost prohibitive or anything like that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I'm seeing, just as I scroll through eBay, Muramasa, I'm surprised, goes between, I'd say, maybe 35 at the cheapest
mhm.
on Wii. Anywhere to 35 to
I
$50, which
was
is like,
looking
wow.
too, and I was like,
Because I
hmm.
want to say my copy was like dirt cheap when I picked it up, maybe like $13 from
I
GameStop or something,
The Wii U
but
still works, and I'm like, I would not mind
just popping it in,
just
playing it
popping it
again.
in and
Yeah.
playing it. That might be easier than trying to charge it, see if, like, hopefully my Vita still works, kind of thing. Um, but I think, moving on
Hmm.
here to the last couple of entries, and again, I
Yeah.
haven't beaten either one of these, but I have played them, and these are pretty significant departures. I
Hmm.
think that we have to, like, at the core there is like that super striking design.
Hmm.
Like, these games, just like the character design is beautiful, the enemy design is beautiful, the, like, every aspect of the art is just top shelf,
Hmm.
like, gorgeous. But Aegis Rim is not a 2D side scrolling beat 'em up. There, it's actually sort of like an interactive, like, visual novel thing
Hmm.
mixed with some tactical turn-based play. And what I would say is, like, the one sort of critique I actually have of Aegis Rim is that the combat sequences, when you're doing, like, the tactical stuff,
Hmm.
it's visually, like, it does sort of a visual swap, where it's
Yeah.
like you've got those beautiful characters and the design, and then when you're doing the tactical combat stuff, it goes to, like, there's this, you'll see, like, these maps of the city, and there's almost like these Space Invader icons pop up,
Hmm.
and that's how, and it's kind of jarring because, like, frankly, it's like, and I don't know if it was, I don't know what the reasoning was behind that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they just wanted to do something different. Maybe they were running low on funding, which
Yeah.
again is kind of an issue with Vanillaware as a general rule. But I would have loved to have seen some of those, the mech models and the enemy models, like, on screen. Even, it's a really blown out view too,
Hmm.
but it would, I think it would have been cool if, like, I could have seen the mechs and the enemies, and, like, fight duking it out
Yeah.
on these maps. But I mean, the gameplay is good. What I will say is, like, I kind of dipped out because I had to, drill down on some stuff for the podcast last year.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and that kind of pulled me away from it. But it's a really robust, like, if you like tactical turn-based stuff, it's a really robust system. There's some interesting
Okay.
builds.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Nice.
it's not too wild, but the loop is good. The gameplay loop is good. The
Yeah.
combat feels good. So if you like tactical stuff, it's if you like I said, if you can kind of get past the fact that the actual combat is pretty minimalist,
Hmm.
it's still pretty good. Like the visual side of combat is pretty minimal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but
That's
that's
cool.
and then I played a little bit of like I touched a little bit of the demo for Overlord.
Hmm.
Um, and what I can say is like it's super pretty.
Okay. Okay.
It's and I think it's probably the most different in that
Hmm.
this one, like you set up your units and stuff. You set up your units, but the way that combat sort of like falls out, it there's no direct control over units. Does that make sense? Like
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
you're almost playing more of like a commander over an army,
Hmm.
and you set up your units, you assign units, and you assign movements and stuff, and then you watch that play out.
Okay. So
Um,
is that similar to like Ogre Battle?
Ogre Battle tends to be a lot more like Ogre Battle is more like Final Fantasy Tactics, where this is like you don't do any like move controls. It's literally you set up your units, you sit
Right.
like, and then they
Right.
just you
Sorry.
tell them where to go or whatever, and then it's like they just do their thing. You
Yeah.
don't tell them what moves to use or anything like that. There's none of that. Um,
So you might be thinking of Tactics Ogre. th- Is the
oh
one that's like Final Fantasy Tactics Ogre Battle, March of the
yeah,
Black
I
Queen
was
on
thinking
Super
like Tactics
Nintendo.
over maybe Ogre Battle. I'm not super familiar with Ogre
Okay.
Battle,
Okay.
so
Yeah, I've played a little bit of the one on Super Nintendo and then played through the one on 64. And it sounds similar. You have you have, I think, I can't remember how many guys you can have in your little parties, but you set them out, and then when they do battle, like, you don't control any of it. They just do according to the units that you've set up and how they
mhm.
want to attack. So that's what it sounds like to me. But yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about Unicorn Overlord. Frankly, I haven't looked too deeply into it because I don't want to add another game to the backlog. But I'm sure it will end up there
I mean,
because,
as
again,
at
nothing
the
but
time
good
of
things.
recording, I think you looked at it. It's
Yeah,
$30.
$30. It's on
It's only
sale. Yeah,
$30, dude.
right.
Come on, dude.
Yeah, just
Just
do
do
it.
it.
Just
Just
do
do
it.
it, dude.
Pick it up. Buy it. Do it now. Yeah, it's even cheaper than Muramasa on Wii. Yeah.
What are you waiting for? Just do it.
and I've heard it's one of the best games of last
Don't
year.
let your dreams be dreams, Josh.
Let it be a backlog. Yeah, so I'll go in reverse, but I don't have as much to say because I haven't played Aegis Rim. It is one that I've heard really good things about. The only thing I'll add to what you said is that it's 13 different characters. Funny anecdote about that is just because it came out in I believe it was 2023, something like that, and so they chose 13 characters. Some like offhand reason. There wasn't any real reason behind 13 characters, but there are. And the game plays in such a way that the story unfolds with each character, and you choose what character and how far in their story to
Yeah.
go at each time. It does lock out at
There
certain
are
points.
soft locks,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that said, that means that the developers needed to hash out every scenario in such a way that if you didn't have the information from this other, interaction, that you could still the story is still understandable no matter which choice you make, and
Well,
you
and
have 13 different characters
it's
to do
flow
that with.
charty.
Yeah,
So like and you can
yeah,
replay the same sequence over and over and over and over and
yeah.
over again. So, yeah.
So it just, that sounds to me extremely complicated, and the fact that they pulled it off is really cool. So this is one that I definitely want to get. I know it's been on sale a couple times. I'm sure I'll pick it up sometime
It
soon. But
and I'm not I know we were talking about 999 earlier, and you were telling me that those games sort of have like a flow chart kind of thing, and you can go
yes,
back, and I imagine that's comparable to
pretty
that.
similar. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
'Cause of
you can
both
you can
visual
sort of
novel.
rip through like some of those sequences really quick to get to what
Yeah.
you need to.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Awesome. And since I'm working backwards, so we didn't really talk much about Dragon's Crown. We just kind of skipped over it. Things
I
I'll
was saving
say.
the worst for last.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's what you're doing. Is that so George Kamatani worked on some of the Dungeons and Dragons games when he was working for Capcom, excuse me, early on in his career in
Mhm.
video games. So this is an ode to those games, a modernized version. So I say modernized, but I mean that in the sense like deeper, more complicated version of those types of games. I have heard that it is a great mechanically, it is a great game. I own it on PS3. I never got around to playing it because of what we mentioned earlier. Is I feel like if I played this for any considerable amount of time, that if my wife were to look at the TV, I would have some explaining to do simply because of a lot of the character models in this game. While it does continue to have I would say, gorgeous art style, it is the most exaggerated out of anything else that they've ever put out. There was even controversy when the game came out, with a lot of American publications that said that the female characters were over sexualized, and then there was talk of, oh, it's not just the female characters, everyone is. Why are you getting so up in arms about it? Which
Yeah.
is, I feel like, is just such a
I mean,
any.
listen, there is merit to that argument. Like in the sense that this is a game that really leans into the swords and sorcery tropes of like
Mhm. Yep.
Conan the Barbarian
Yep.
and Red Sonja, and like just like turns all of that up to 11, right?
Right. Yeah, characters with tons of muscles, exaggerated features, and very, very little clothing. That kind of
Yeah,
fantasy
yeah,
style.
and
Yeah.
and it's and one of the things Josh and I said is like especially sort of in the case of two of the female characters,
Mhm.
it's like it's to me personally like it's a little grotesque, and I would
Yeah,
say like if you find that to be
absolutely.
like appealing, you might want to do some self-examination there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but it's like it doesn't change the fact that this is by far the most fan service. Like
Mhm.
this just takes the fan service and just like leans all the way into it.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because, yeah, and I have played some of this as well.
Mhm.
And I do want to go back and finish it because what you said is like it is a real technically. It's one. I think it's in some ways it's a 2D side scrolling beat 'em up, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it's also really masterfully done. And there's like lots of really cool visual stuff. Like what I was telling
Mhm.
you is like, again, like the way that like it moves, like you move through the environments, it
Mhm.
sort of puts these things almost on like a cylinder, and it's very stylized. And like when you see it, you're like, oh, that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the combat is really pretty robust. There's pretty
Mm.
in-depth like leveling system. It's technically, and I think like now the Dungeons and Dragons Capcom games, like they would do this thing where like you could move between different, not levels, but like
Mhm.
in the what would be like the horizontal plane of the game, like you can move between different lanes, and
Yeah.
there's also some of that in the game as well, and it adds just like sort of a level and a technical finesse, a
Mhm.
level of tech of finesse that I think, and so it's a game that it's the game that I have like the strongest caveats for, like, hey,
Right.
like,
Right.
I wasn't like trying to, I felt like this was probably the best place to end the the conversation was in talking about this game,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because like everything else, we can kind of say like, hey, there's some fan servicey elements, but overall, it's pretty ignorable. It's not to say that it's completely ignorable, but it's not like, and again, if you're sensitive to that stuff, like obviously don't play it, don't tempt yourself, don't
Right. Right.
don't whatever. But it's like some of it's fairly it's pretty tame. Dragon's Crown doesn't shy away from anything, and it's not like
Mhm.
it's not pornographic, but it's as close to not being like it gets as close in some ways to that line without crossing it
Mhm.
as is possible,
Yeah.
and that's kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
And again, like even if you were to just play the male characters, I think just like some of the enemy designs are,
Yeah.
you know,
That's what I was gonna say. Yep.
titillating. They're a little racy, and so you have to be pretty careful there. So
Mhm.
it's just one of those things where Dragon's Crown is like the hardest one to make an argument for, just
Right.
because, and again, like the gameplay is there. It's probably in some ways one of the more interesting titles as far as gameplay and design from Vanillaware.
Mhm.
But yeah, the
Yeah. Because of all those
unfortunately,
caveats. Yeah.
unfortunately, it's like the design choices leave a lot to be desired, um,
Mhm.
as far as the aesthetics go.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. And that's that, I was going to say it and you already did, is that I was just thumbing through some of the artwork for the game, and unfortunately it's not, because okay, you can get away with, out of the, I believe it's 6 playable characters, maybe it's 5. 2 of them I would frankly never play as. I do not want them to be on the screen at all. Um
I wouldn't
but
want my
okay,
kid to see those. I
right.
wouldn't want to have to explain that to my wife.
It's
And
embarrassing.
yeah,
It would be embarrassing for me if anyone saw me playing it. And I don't even say that as a pastor. I say that just as like a regular person, you know?
as a
Uh,
like, listen, we are weeb adjacent.
right.
And so
Right.
like there's a lot of embarrassing stuff that we're just like, if somebody like rolled into our house, and it's not like perverse or disgusting, but we're just like, what are you watching? Uh you know,
Yeah.
like I I don't we already talked about like just the exercise in futility that is trying to explain anime anyways.
Hmm.
Um so
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it seems as though, like you mentioned, it's also some enemies, or at least some characters you come in contact with. I don't even know if they're enemies or like, shopkeepers or whatever, but it seemed as though there's some key art for characters that are, um even if they're not playable, they're, again, something that I just would not want on screen. So unfortunately, I mean, I feel like even doing this episode, like, I don't think my PlayStation 3 copy is ever going to see any playtime, because this just pushes it further into the back burner, because I don't know when I would ever play it if no one else could be around while I play. And at that point, like, why would I even want to? It's like, frankly, the Vita version would be the most playable version for me, because I can hide it from anyone else. But at that point, like, am I just playing the game to get through another game? Because
Yeah.
that doesn't even sound like I would enjoy it, even though I could see the quality of the gameplay. It wouldn't be enjoyable any longer. So
Yeah,
yeah,
like
it's a
even you
shame.
saying that kind of like it acts like a bit of a break for me in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of like it throttles some of that down a little bit, where it's like, hey, like eventually, yeah, I'd like to like play through this, but it's like I think if I do start it up, it's going to be like you're on pretty thin ice, and the minute like it gets like, do you know what I'm saying? Where I would
Yeah.
just say like, yeah, like this is pretty easily going to be like, no thanks.
Yeah.
Like I own it and I want to play it, but if you get like a little too whatever, like we're just done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Which is a shame, because especially, like, I've heard it's a really good co-op game too. And I've
yeah.
played, Shredder's Revenge with my kids. Like, this is the type of game mechanically that I would want to play with my kids.
Well,
But
and I think Parker and I have talked about playing it together, and
yeah.
so it's like one of those things where if like I think like the thing is like if he were to like throw down and be like we shouldn't be playing this, that would be like the sure sign for where it's like I'm just like, okay, like let's just kill the thing, like let's just forget about it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he tends to be the a voice of reason for me sometimes, where he's
Sure.
like, "Hey, like, have you thought about this?" And I'm like, "I don't want to. Shut up." Like,
Nice.
but the good friends do that for you. And,
Yep.
even this
Yep.
conversation where it's like, I was like, "Ah, yeah, someday I'll play it." And then I'm like, well, maybe, but also maybe not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
If
it's
they ever
but
make like Dragon's Crown minus edition, you know, where they actually like tone down all that stuff, even if
or
it's
at
like a
least they
joke game.
just put like more clothes on things.
Right.
That'd
Right.
just be fine.
Yeah.
Um,
That would be hilarious. Can you imagine? But
and
that's not going to
so
happen.
I think just sort of like landing the plane is like, this is a developer that both of us have a lot of affection for.
Yeah.
And we do especially, recommend Muramasa, the Demon Blade. And like,
Mhm.
listen, like, folks, here I'm just gonna say, if and this is a major if, especially at this point in time, there's ever like a remake or a remaster of that game, do not
Mhm.
hesitate to pull the trigger on that. Like, it's
Yeah.
full like I see that, it's like, boom, money, gimme.
Mhm.
Like, and so, and I think Josh would probably like co-sign on that. Maybe not that enthusiastically,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I'm like 95% there unless like you and or anyone else in your household is really sensitive to fan service. Again, there's not very much in it, but it is there.
mhm.
And again, I didn't even remember it until thumbing through some of the art here recently. So, and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that was there." And it wasn't just me being like, "Oh, that's weird." It's like, no, actually, this is, even researching for this episode, I'll say that as we land the plane, is I didn't realize how prevalent that was through the entire catalog, if that makes sense. There's always one or two characters that's just like, okay, you
Yeah,
threw that in there just to be,
there's
you know,
always an
just to be
element of
pervy.
fan service to these games,
Yeah.
and it just like your mileage may vary.
Yeah. Yeah.
For some people that's not going to be a deal breaker. For some people that's not going to be like a stumbling block or a real issue, and that's fine. And for others, it's like, if that's a struggle, if that is a stumbling block, like, hey, like, there's no shame in dipping out. Like, these games are
Mhm.
cool, but they're not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
and I will say, the final thought, sorry, is that because of all the backlash that Dragon's Crown received, even though it sold really well, it seems as though they have backed away quite a bit from that. I know of one character in Aegis Rim that is a bit more exaggerated than the other characters. I have
mm,
not heard of anything in Unicorn Overlord, but I haven't looked extensively at a lot of the artwork. Because again, I don't want to look too deep into the game because I don't want to put another game on my backlog. Because I've heard it's really good.
for
So
now.
so they're right. So I'm saying that like kind of the silver lining is it seems like there's less of that nowadays. Now their next game they could
Well,
flush all
and
that down the
I would
toilet.
say,
But
like, I think too, like, just the culture has shifted
mm,
significantly. Like,
hmm
when Odin Sphere came out, when Muramasa came out, when Dragon's Crown came out, like, and yes, there was like some pushback and some people, but it's like, that wasn't a big deal. Like, fan service was just kind of like the norm.
hmm
Um, and to a certain extent, I'm not going to say that it wasn't like, but it was just like, like, pervy Japanese game going to be pervy. Like,
yeah,
it's just kind of like, and I think now we live in a culture where there are conversations about some of that stuff that are a little more prevalent.
hmm
And so, yeah, I would just say, like, it is different now,
yeah,
and some of the things that were done, you're just not going to get those. Like,
hmm
you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like, if Dragon's Crown came out today, there, well, I don't know. Cause like, also, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot more permissiveness in some ways too.
sure,
So who knows? But yeah, it's Vanillaware. Like, their games are beautiful. but like there's a little bit of degen in there that you got to
Right.
worry about. Like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that again, that kind of sums up to me like this guy Kamatani is like, he's a great artist. Sometimes he uses that to draw some perverse things. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
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 With a
It's,
great power came great responsibility, and he doesn't always wield that well.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So,
So.
it's, yeah, we just thought it would be fun to have a conversation about one of our sort of like favorite cult classic developers. And maybe sort of just throw some thoughts out there for our brothers and sisters, and for anybody listening. It's like, hey, these games are pretty good. They're really beautiful. And yeah, there are some warnings to be heeded.
Yeah.
So
there you go. All right, man. Well, that was a good conversation. I think the conversation was anything but vanilla. Get that pun in there one more time.
Why?
But before,
why?
just because we can.
See, it's uses like that that actually devalue the word itself.
It's true.
Like
yeah,
you are making the word actively worse every time you do that.
Yeah. I agree, and yet I still continue to do it. I know the thing that the thing that I do that I don't want to do.
I do the thing that I don't want to, and I don't do the things that I know I ought to.
Right,
Yes.
right, exactly.
Okay.
But before we head out for the evening, we do have a couple more forms to follow. The first of which is our community shout out. We like having a community, whether that's in Discord, whether that's on YouTube in the comments section, whatever. We've got our community, and we've got some shout outs for that community. And my shout out this week goes to a bot. It goes out to PorchoBot because I just thought it was so much fun to see him pop up in our Discord. And I say that one of our members, Porcho, he's a patron, made himself a little bot, or there was a bot made that he used for a little while to interact for a while. That may or may not have been pretty convincing for a little bit until he revealed everything that I've been saying on this certain subject was an AI bot. And he just kind of copied and pasted that. And I thought that was funny. So shout out to you, PorchoBot, because you made me laugh. So, Nate, who do you have to shout out?
Basically, everybody who's been throwing us a sub on YouTube. You rule. So all the cool... I don't know why. I put candy in my mouth. I'm eating Milk Duds, which are trash candy, but I still love them. But
yeah,
I'm going to mute myself for a second.
Okay. Yeah, mute. And for those of you watching on YouTube, even though he's muted, you get to see him chew. Now, he's not like my son. He doesn't chew with his mouth open. I just threw my son under the bus. That was not very nice.
At least this time. I didn't do it this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for everybody who's been throwing us a sub on YouTube, that's really cool. Thank you. And if you haven't done that yet, what are you waiting for? Come on, get on it. Like, be cool like everybody else.
Do it.
Sub.
I'd like for you to like me. Sub.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And then share.
and ding the bell.
Ding the bell.
Notifications.
Get all the notifications.
Whatever the YouTube people say. I don't know. That's us now. We're YouTube people.
We're YouTube people now, apparently.
There we go.
You know what I realized, Josh?
What did you realize?
There is another form that we have to observe. And we have not discussed what we were going to do for this one.
Well, that form comes in the form of a question. And that question is, what is your question? That's right. What is your question? So you have questions for us here on the podcast. And Nate and I had discussed, I suppose we had forgotten, that we would each bring our own question to the table and decide which was the best question. So I do have a question that was submitted.
Good.
That I will go ahead and answer. But
I did forget that I made that suggestion.
Didn't want to throw you under the bus, but that was I had the same thought in preparation. Is that, oh no, we don't have a question? But then I was like, wait, no, we're each supposed to bring our own. So actually, we didn't have very many questions, frankly. We did receive a question, and I don't want to say it's a bad question. It is a good question. But there was one that was along the lines of, what is one of the most interesting anecdotes you have for one of your favorite games? And while I think that caused a lot of good conversation in the Discord, which I very much appreciate, I also felt that that was a bit generic, because I was thinking of things that I could say, but I'm like, you know what? We kind of cover these things whenever we're kind of adjacent to that topic. Like, I feel like I've thrown out like 3 or 4 anecdotes in this episode alone about Vanillaware. So rather than that one, another question that I saw from Mr. McKelvey in the Discord was, we know what Pokemon Nate would eat, but what about Josh? So I've got a few answers to that question, and the first 2 are just are kind of my runner-up answers. Okay, the first one is far-fetched because he comes with his own leek that you can cook him in. And that would probably, make him taste better. A bird cooked in his own leek. The second one would be a cherubi. If you know what a cherubi is, it looks like a little cherry. But then I thought, oh, that actually sounds like a horror movie, because you think you just, eat a cherry and then blood starts dripping from your lips because you've just eaten a sentient being rather than I mean, can you imagine? Like, you go to eat a grape and all of a sudden it starts bleeding in your mouth. That sounds
How about
horrifying.
screaming?
Yeah. So maybe not a cherubi. Okay, so the last 2, which are kind of my real answer here. Okay. The first one that comes to mind, yeah, actually this one's going to be second. This one's going to be second. The first one will be next. Second up is Magikarp sushi. Okay. Because Magikarp is a trash Pokemon, and I hated him when I was playing Pokemon as a kid. And so you dice him up into some sushi, and that would be fantastic. Now I get it. Magikarp turns into Gyarados. He's worth having. I always had a Gyarados. Yes, he's great. But while he's a Magikarp, he sucks, and I hate him. And I would like to have him on some seasoned rice. That sounds delicious. It would just suck if any other
I'm just going to sort of
Magikarp
reiterate the fact that you're a monster for willingly consuming the flesh of sentient creatures.
But I mean, isn't that what sushi is anyway? Like, what does it make a difference that it's
No,
Pokemon?
like fish. There's no conclusive evidence that fish have any awareness. In fact, most
Okay,
research indicates they have almost no awareness.
gotcha.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, also they're fish, so that's disgusting.
yeah. But dogs have awareness. Are you saying you can't
I
eat
would not eat
dogs?
a dog.
Okay, ever
That's
under any
that's why I wouldn't
circumstance?
eat a dog,
Sorry.
because I'm pretty sure listen, cow. Oh man, now we're getting into tricky territory, because
I
pigs actually have demonstrated like a fairly robust. They should be so
yeah.
delicious.
Right. It's your fault.
It's your fault, you stupid pig. You
I
taste too good.
I was just kidding about the dogs, by the way. That was a joke, a bad joke, but it was a joke. Actually, that rolls perfectly into my first, my number one. It would be a mill tank, because you could get some steaks out of that cow. That would be pretty awesome. So definitely mill tank steak. Mill tank
True
steak.
monster.
Yeah.
You
Well,
are a monster.
I
I'm
mean,
just
I like
saying.
steak, so be delicious.
See, no, and
Be delicious.
you went and you said this, and you sort of skipped past this because, like, you said, well, we kind of do this anyway. But I thought it was a good question, so
Okay.
I'm assuming we were kind of looking at the same one here. But
Mm-hmm.
our buddy Sojourner did ask, "What's the
Mm-hmm.
strangest or most interesting fact you know about a game? Be that in-game lore, development history, etc."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I like the emphasis on what is the strangest fact
Okay.
you know
Okay.
about a game.
Yep.
Like, I
That's
think
fair.
like him opening up with that. And so now I have to think, what is like the weirdest thing that I know about a
Odd.
game? And there was
Hmm.
some really actually heinous like you use the word interesting conversation or good conversation. I would say heinous. There's some absolutely cursed garbage that got brought up.
Wow, I must have amnesia then because I don't I don't remember reading cursed
There's a
garbage.
lot of talk about Sonic, which
Okay.
just is always disturbing to me.
Oh, that's
Uh,
right. That's right. Yeah, I guess that is cursed. That
yeah,
Sonic was
you're
always
welcome.
planned to have a
A
human
human
companion.
girlfriend.
Yeah.
Blech. Like
Wasn't it like
up
Mona
until
Lisa
recent,
or something like that?
that might be the strangest thing that I now know about a video game. I always liked that line from like it's more of the Scott Pilgrim line.
Mhm.
You know, it's like Pac-Man, Paku Paku,
Paku Paku. Yeah. Yeah.
Paku Paku. That was a good one. Um, I'm trying to think here. Hmm.
That Tetris was owned by the Russian government. That one's always fun.
Yeah, that one's always fun. There's like that, and that's the thing is like video games. There is just like there's a lot of shenanigans in just video game history.
Mhm.
Um, okay, like it's just something we've talked about, but it's like the strangest thing is that like, and it's not like a major secret, but like Shadow of the Colossus was supposed to have a lot more than
Mm.
like the 16 colossi or however many it is,
Mhm.
like a lot more, and that the design by deletion stuff was probably born more out of necessity just because the PS2 couldn't handle everything they wanted to do in
Mhm.
the game, and so they just started cutting out giant points. And um so I would say like that might be one of the strangest or most interesting things. And like when you're actually playing the PS2 version, there's a lot of stuff like where it's like there's stuff in that game, and it might even be in the recent remake or what or remake, you know, that remake that came out a few years ago for PS4. Um, it might even be there, but there's a lot of stuff in that world that seems like, oh, this could be used for something, and it has no point because that colossi was just sort of like the colossi that was supposed to like sort of tie into that got yoinked out of existence.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah. I
that might be the strangest one of the strangest things I know.
I don't know why it popped into my head, but one of the strange things that I know is that the character of Dan, who was introduced in Street
Oh,
Fighter Alpha, was a joke character made because there was a rivalry between Capcom's fighting games and SNK's fighting games.
yeah.
So it's really just to poke fun at SNK. He was supposed to be a joke character who,
He sucks,
Mhm.
and he sucks on purpose to just
Yeah,
poke fun at SNK. Yeah,
right. And
that's a good one.
yeah, his moveset is like similar to Ryu and Ken's, but worse. Like weird
But
arcs for
garbage.
kicks and not very powerful. And I just learned this as I was double checking when he was first introduced that that his style of fighting, it's this Japanese style Seiyakyu Ryu, which just means the strongest style. So yeah. But
Okay.
he was originally a joke.
I
I know he's been included in other ones. Like I don't think he's a joke anymore, but that's how he got
no,
started.
he's still kind of a garbage character.
Oh,
Like
okay,
he's
okay.
always. I don't think he's as much of a joke
Mhm.
anymore. But he's like not. He's like the crappier version of Ken and Ryu.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because that's I've got a strange fact that will
Mhm.
blow your mind.
Okay.
Alucard is actually Dracula spelled backwards.
What?
Yeah.
Dr. Acula.
Dr. Acula. Oh man.
Oh
Um
my gosh.
yeah, I'm sure that if I had actually spent time thinking about it, I could have come up with something. But I mean, that's the point of the question too, is like to um just have like a sort of off the cuff response to not think about it too much.
Mhm.
So um how did we decide that we were going to do this? Was it just like we're each going to bring one, and then at the end of the 6 months, everybody's name goes in the hat?
Sure. Let's do
Sure, let's do that.
that.
So,
Thank you for asking questions. So another second halfway, but hearty hail and hearty shout out to you as well for asking questions.
Yeah.
Isaac, you're a good friend.
Isaac and John both. And for
Good guys.
listeners, new viewers, like listen, twice a year, these questions, they're kind of important. One, we like doing it,
Mhm.
but two, in 6 months, at the end of 6 months, we're going to do a drawing
Throw all those
from
names,
the hat.
Throw the names in the hat. Shake up the hat. See who
Then
wins.
pull a name out,
You get
and
25
whoever
bucks.
wins, you get $25 in credit or whatever. Like, you know,
Video game currency.
video game
however you
currencies.
like it.
So yeah,
Well,
so
currency for video games, not like
if you
Zenny.
want if you want a shot at winning $25, give us your best question.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
or let us know what your question is.
What is your question?
The thing.
That's always fun. And the last episode of every month, we answer those questions.
Yeah.
So this is the last episode of every month. It's been a fun
Not
way
every month, this month.
of yes, the last episode of this month. And it's a fun way to end out January, asking some questions, talking about Vanillaware. It's been a good time.
Mhm.
But you can ask us those questions tons of different ways. Hey, here on YouTube, if you just leave a comment and ask a question, on Discord, Facebook, however you want to get in contact with us, you can find all those different ways that we're on the internet on our Linktree, which is linktree.com/the Backlog Breakdown. So check that out. There's links and descriptions and show notes and all that stuff as well. So reach out to us there, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, do it. Be cool.
Do it.
Yeah,
man.
But yeah, Josh, we were not good at brevity. Actually, the only thing we were good at is being bad at brevity tonight.
That's true.
But you know what? It was a good conversation,
Mhm.
enjoyable. Hopefully, you listeners, you watchers out there, audience members, hopefully you found it fruitful and fun.
Yeah.
Because
Hopefully we didn't wear you out. Wasn't too vanilla.
That was such a stretch, such a stinking stretch. Like, you're drunk. Go home.
I mean, you didn't want me to make another vanilla pun, right? So
I'd rather no puns at all. Anyways, you know what? We just need to we need to end it.
Yeah.
All right.
That's probably a good idea.
Hey, folks, have a good night, good day, whatever. And until next time, Josh, what should they do?
Guys, keep beating down your backlogs, and we'll keep breaking down the benefits.
Sure.
I don't know why I said it like that. Can you hear the music this time? Check under your chair. You get a benefit. And you get a benefit. And you get a benefit.
Benefits for everyone.